All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning and early afternoon. I'm already losing my voice, not so long. With us, I'm Leslie Beauregard, I'm interim city manager, and I'm really pleased to start working with each of you. Let me introduce Mary Rios very quickly, so she can say a few words of welcome.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Leslie said I'm Andrea Oates, but we already met during the interview process. I'm the mayor of the city of Stanton. We also have Councilor Brenda Mead here. Good morning. Good morning. I just want to say, on behalf of the Stanton City Council, we truly appreciate the fact that you are taking time out to serve your very important mission. We truly are honored to know that each and every one of you want to make Stanton a better place for all. And through the guidance of Dr. Stacia, all the different ideas that all the great minds in this room will bring to the table to help create direction for the future of Stanton, making it a welcoming place, a fair place for all to live. We certainly appreciate the fact that you want to see Stanton become the model that all of Virginia will follow. So thank you so much for your willingness to be a part of making history here in Stanton. Please enjoy your day. Thank you.
You have the link.
I got it.
Councilmember Mead, if the other liaison, would you like to say something as well?
Yes, I would. The folks that are in this room know from your lived experiences in other places around the world that there is not equitable access for everyone. And so this is not about determining whether there is equity and diversity in our city. We know we are missing some important elements. So this committee, this commission should be about understanding where we have issues and weaknesses, helping us to understand how we can resolve some of those issues, what the city can do, what the people of the city can do, and so it's great work, and everything you will do over the next 18 months will be very much appreciated and very useful to the city council and to the city of Stanton. So thanks.
Thank you. Last but not least, let me introduce Dr. Robin Stacia, and I'll let her introduce herself also. She will be with us for the entire day, leading us through these initial meetings. So it's been very exciting to work with her these past few months. Dr. Stacia, take it away. We're launching. Yeah.
So you're gonna do the slides. I think I have an intro.
You want to go and do that? You want? Okay. Let me see.
Well, hello everyone.
Hi.
So I'm happy to be here. As Leslie said, I've been working with Leslie and City Council to bring this vision to life. My name is Robin Stacia. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, from the Midwest, but I do live in Atlanta. So I guess I'm getting a little southern now. I've been in Atlanta for 16 years. I'm a clinical psychologist by background, practice as a clinical psychologist for 15 years, direct care, 25 years in healthcare, and always had a consulting practice where my focus is leadership. I work primarily at the leadership level. You guys are leaders. That's why I'm here with you. Working on governance. You're going to be doing governance, diversity, equity, and inclusion, access, belonging, justice, all of those issues as they intersect with leadership. And as leaders have to begin to think deeply about this work and about action. Strategies, outcomes, not just training, but doing. So this is not a training session today, it's a doing session today. You're going to be learning and thinking and beginning to integrate what you're learning into the task that's ahead of you. So I came to Stanton through the Virginia Risk Sharing Association, which is a mouthful, which is the organization that Stanton, City of Stanton is a part of. There's funding insurance group. And I've been their inclusion resident for 2 years. I do that a lot where I work with groups for a long time, deeply working with their members. Well, they had a grant opportunity and City of Stanton applied and they got the grant with me. So they got to work with me. So the sharing gave them some funding. And so Leslie and I developed the process that brought you all in the room, and we're thrilled. We couldn't be more excited, to be honest. And just the skills, the diversity, the competence, the interest, the professional background, the community depth. Once you guys get to know each other, you are going to know that you are a team that can get this work done. Because you are really an impressive group. We are, like, I'm serious, we're just like, this could not have worked out better. That we ended up with the group that we did. So age range, skills, expertise, background, I mean, you've got it all in this group. And so I want you to just start to feel the capability that you have. And we're gonna do our best today to equip you with a good baseline to get started. And then there's gonna be, of course, the logistics and all that kind of stuff that we're gonna get a lot of work done.
So can I just say a few words?
Yes, you may.
So this is important stuff. Bathrooms are out the door to the left, there's a little hallway on the right. Of course, the little dining areas back there. If you need to get up, get some water, a soda, coffee, a donut, anytime. Wi-Fi password is Stanton1, $ is the X. So if you need to get into the Wi-Fi, and it's the, what is it again, from Morgan Left? You'll see it, it's Stewart Hall something, yes, SH something. So that's the Wi-Fi password. I think that's it logistically.
So we're to mute folks.
Oh, she's muted, okay. I think logistically that's it, so, enjoy the space, we actually love the space. Awesome. I guess so with that, you just, I'll let Robin take it away.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
I did that already. All right, so this is what we're gonna accomplish today. We're going to, you know, it's really important that not that you all see things the same, but that you understand what terms mean and what the issues are. We want you to have diversity of thought. So we're expecting that as you work together, there's going to be some good debates. There's going to be some differences of opinion, but there's some common framework that we all have to have a common understanding about. And so we're going to talk about some terms. A lot of these terms are terms you've heard before, or you even believe you know. But I just want to make sure that you really know. Because sometimes we think we have the correct understanding or definition, and in fact, we might be a little off. So we're going to do some reviewing of terms and constructs. That's a big chunk of the work this morning. Everything that has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, why we do this work, what it means, we're going to cover it. Then we're going to talk about your commission and the expectations of what it is that you're supposed to do. And that's when we seriously lock the door and you cannot change your mind. That's a lot of work. So, you know, if you didn't really get it, you're going to get it today. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but you already agreed. Too late. Oh, no. We're going to go through your roles and responsibilities and what we need from you. So this is also a commitment. And, you know, I work with boards. That's what I do. I work with boards, you are a board, you're a commission, and, you're volunteers. I work with folks who primarily are volunteers. And I always say to them, you volunteered for this. So then you have to do it. And it's gonna take time, but it's gonna be so rewarding. And the impact is going to be great for the city. And I'm excited about what you're gonna accomplish. And then we're gonna talk about some regulations, because there are regulations. We have some guests here. So there are open meeting regulations and all those things that I couldn't possibly know, but we have experts who have advised us, and Leslie's gonna go over the regulations. And Leslie and I are gonna be presenting together. I'll be presenting the bulk of the time, but she has free reign to pipe in and, you know, help get me on track if I say something that's totally out of place, that's not true. And as well as, you know, just to kind of share in the conversation. Our council representative is here as an observer, so she won't be participating or speaking or talking during the session. She's just here as an observer and a liaison to the council. And as is with our guests who are here as observers. So is everybody okay? Any questions about what we're going to do today?
I do.
Yeah.
You just hear this today, or will you take us on this journey?
So, that's yet to be decided. Yeah, to get you started is what we were envisioning, and then we'll see what comes next. Okay? Yeah. All right. Next slide. So, with this work, we want to set some groundwork. And most of you are familiar with groundwork. You do that work probably or in other settings when you are. And groundwork is important, particularly when you're working in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because this is emotional work. I've been listening to a podcast called Seeing White. It's we're going to give you lots of recommendations for podcasts and books and articles and things to read. And this is emotional. Even when I watch some of the videos that I'm going to show you that I've seen over and over, I mean, I feel it. And your experiences are real. And so you have to have a space here where you can feel safe, where you will respect each other. And so I put some of the things up here that are important that I have found. No matter what role you have professionally, when you're in this room, you're all equal. So whether someone in this room is any leadership role, you're all equal in this room. The other one that I like is to stay engaged and to stay present. Whether you feel emotional, whether you feel irritated, whether you're tired and exhausted, as most of us already are, we need you to stay engaged and to stay present. And that means really listening. And often we're listening to figure out what we're going to say next. I want you to listen, just to listen, to understand. Not to think about how am I going to respond to that. Because so what am I hearing that person say? And this is important with your team, but this is going to be important outside of the commission when you're talking to the community, is to really be able to hear what they're saying. I want you to be prepared, as I said, to experience emotional discomfort, a range of feelings based upon what work you're doing, what we're talking about today, but even beyond. The other one I love here is no fixing. Our instinct is if someone gets emotional or we believe that they're in pain, is to try to comfort them and to say, it's okay, it's all right. Let's feel it. Let's not try to fix each other. Instead, let's ask each other, begin to practice that giving power and asking each other, how can I help you? Do you need any help? Is there something that you would like from us? And not try to step in and believe we know what the other person needs and to try to fix and soothe, and give people the space to move through whatever feelings, thoughts, or emotions that they're gonna have. And then the last ones that, the last two I like is soft on each other, judgment free. So this means, talking about the experiences that people are sharing, both in the commission and outside of the commission, and not judging the person. Such as we now don't say, homeless people, we say people who are not housed. So we lead with centering the person and not their condition. So we don't say anymore, we would never attribute anything to someone regarding their situation, such as someone who has, calling someone, I know you guys wouldn't, but I'll just use the word as an example, crazy, or saying someone is mentally whatever. We say people who are living with a mental illness, because it is an illness. It's like someone who's living with diabetes, or someone who's living with hypertension. So we really want to be person-centered and judgment-free. And it doesn't mean you're gonna get it right every time. So you'll continue to correct yourself, because all of us have gotten into a habit of centering the issues and not the person. And our society uses statements that blame people for conditions that they are experiencing that most often are not conditions that are primarily under their control, right? And then the other is take risks. So if you all are going to take risks in here and tell the truth, you're not going to expect those who you're going to be meeting with along the way to take risks. This needs to be the place where you really share how you have experienced things, what you're hearing, what you know, and to be honest, right? Honest and straightforward, and not to be, not to hold back and to lose this opportunity. And certainly not to go out in the hallway and be honest, but you weren't honest in here around this table. And we're gonna talk later on about behavior, like the responsibilities of being in a commission and how we behave in a professional way that does not fragment and doesn't cause division within the group. So we're gonna definitely talk about that at the end. So, but are there other things that are important to you guys for creating a safe space that I don't have listed that is, something that's go-to for you? I'd love to hear if you add to this.
I do have a slightly related question.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to go around the room and do short introductions?
Oh, yes, that's part of it. Yeah.
Excuse me, could you repeat the questions, because I.
Oh, yeah, she said, are you all gonna do introductions? And I said, yes, that's coming up. Yeah,
I guess you have it listed there, and I think it's probably one of the most important, for me it is listening. To actually
yeah.
give that space to listen
right.
to one another and to the community. I think that's, we can't do anything if we don't actually, if it's an active thing.
Yeah. In case you can't see everybody's name, she's Jennifer, and this young lady is Dottie?
Yes.
All right, great. Any other things you guys want to add to the list, or are we good? Okay, all right, next slide. So, as obvious, we already in the introduction, I have that point yet. Okay. That is like, when we gonna do,
I'm ready to go.
I'm ready to go. So, I always start also by letting you know that a part of your commitment is three commitments. The first commitment is this collective commitment. When you signed up for this, you put in your application for this commission, you were saying, I choose to work with a team. I know this commission is not an individual assignment, it's a collective assignment. And so you have a collective commission, a collective commitment to work together. And that working together is gonna be fun sometimes and challenging sometimes, but you can't bail out on the togetherness. So sometimes we've all been in groups where people come in and we know they're really not working as a part of the team. They're holding back, they're isolating, they're whatever. But this commitment is a collective commitment. It's also a governance commitment. You've been charged, you're going to hear more about the charge, to help uncover and to develop some proposals that city council will use in their governance of this city to create improvements and changes and to strengthen things that are doing well. Because we're not going to just look for things that are going bad. We're going to also look for what's going well. Any great work has to be balanced. And there's stuff that's going well here. So you're going to want to uplift that and continue it and learn from it. So you have a governance role. And then you have a personal journey. You cannot do this work if you do not starting today say, I have to invest in learning. I have to invest in reading. I have to invest time in understanding these issues deeper, both about diversity, equity, inclusion, about government, about our communities. I have to take time to read the data and the information that is shared with me. So it is a personal journey. And a lot of that work is going to take place outside of this commission group. It's going to take place at home, you know, your Saturday morning coffee, your Sunday afternoon on the porch, wherever you choose to do it. But it is a personal commitment as well. It is a learning journey on multiple levels in order for this to be successful. And you have to say to yourself, I have to be transformed. I have to go further along this journey than where I am starting in order to really be a good steward of the information that I'm receiving. We are all continued learners. Next slide. And so we have to really focus on that. So we have to realize that this is not a check the box activity. This is a full throttle engagement activity where you're going to have an opportunity to make a big difference. Next. So I'm going to start with the video, and then we're going to do introductions after this video. And this is an Apple video. This is not a commercial for an Apple product. And it just happens to be a really good video that I love, and it will tee up our introduction discussion.
Is it have sound? Yeah. Uh-oh.
I can barely hear it, but I think it's coming from the computer.
There's no speakers?
Well, it should. We didn't test this part. Leslie, can you hover over that? Is there?
It's already off. Let me just, it's up all the way.
Okay. It should, because we've got the stuff hooked into it. Oh, that's got audio out on it. So it should be when I connect all that stuff into it, it should work.
I have 5 videos, y'all. So we need to get.
We can open our phones and
No.
put it in
Group experience.
Figure this out. Hold on.
Okay, so while they do that, we'll do old fashioned introduction. I'm using my phone. And we'll just go around the room and have everyone say their name and where you're from in Stanton and what you hope to get out of being on this commission. And then, hopefully these videos are gonna work, or we'll be very, I'll be very disappointed. So, yeah.
Yeah, my name is, can you all hear me if I speak like this? Yeah. My name is Lou Bowden. I live on East Beverly Street up the hill. I've been married for almost 53 years. I am retired for quite a while now. My wife and I built a multi-office real estate company in Northern Virginia, which required me to work with any kind of person you can imagine and learn how to deal with different cultures and different beliefs. I also later in life went back to school. I studied alternative therapies. I had a wellness practice for many years, for a few years down here, studying body psychodynamics and helping people get through those kinds of things. And then all of a sudden, much to my shock and amazement, I ended up in a seminary, which I had, believe me, I was the last person who ever thought that would do that. But my wife said, so you want to go to a seminary? I said, no, you don't understand. I have to go. So I went for 2 years running back and forth.
So I'm loving this story.
Okay,
This is just a little intro right
I'm sorry.
now. No, you're doing great.
Okay.
But I have to keep us on track because we got a lot of folks. So
It's okay, I've been in your shoes.
everything you said is great. So if you can just say why you're on this, what you aspire to get out of the commission, and we're gonna go on to Mark.
All right, what I aspire to get out of the commission is a feeling that I have served the community to help it grow together and be inclusive, which it is not now. And I do have to say one thing. The opening remarks, I wrote it down so I wouldn't have it in my brain. I couldn't listen. It was said, building this commission on conservative Christian values. I am neither conservative,
What opening remarks did that?
the person who welcomed us here.
Oh, the mayor said that. Okay, see, I didn't even hear that.
I am neither conservative, nor am I a Christian. And if I, that hit me right in the heart.
Right, well, that's not, I will say that that's not the scope of that's from her perspective.
Okay.
But the commission is, in order for the commission to work, it's gonna honor all faiths, all values, all political perspectives, all of those things. Yes, it is not, I didn't even hear that. So thank you for saying that, so we can clarify. Absolutely. This commission is gonna embrace all religions, which is what this video is gonna show us. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mark Jeter. I live up on Sunnyside Street, next to the Mary Baldwin Physical Activity Center. Been in Stanton on and off for about 20 years. And I've been exposed to a lot of this work in different formats. But the practical side of getting this as a complete set to then be able to apply to my community and have that change that can make it come together better, I think is what I would want to do.
Hi, my name is Daniel Stolzatz, and I'm a retired sociologist of race, research methods, and social inequality. And I've lived here about 21 years, raised my son here, and it's a great place to raise a kid. What I want is just to be part of a contribution to making this town, realize its ambitions and its aspirations.
A retired sociologist, research.
Yeah.
You're awesome. We need you. That's the part a lot of people don't like doing. So we got someone.
I worked with the county as well. I was the investigator for a gang model assessment.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So I have a little bit.
I hope you guys are feeling confident with what.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Hey, Jay.
Good morning. My name is Jake Crew. My pronouns are he, him. I work at James Madison University as an executive assistant, soon to be University of Virginia. I'm also a community organizer in the area. I've only been in Stanton for since February of 2021, but I've lived in the Shenandoah Valley since 2013. I love this area. I love the people in it. I love the potential of what we can be. What I don't love is what we currently are. We're a place that has seen a lot of division that is artificial, and it doesn't need to be that way. What I want to see out of this commission is us build something robust, where we can make this a community where everyone feels truly welcome, where everyone feels like they have a voice, they can speak and be heard. I'm just excited to be here.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Beth Nelson. I just moved to Stanton. I moved here April 1st, and I'm a part-time employee at JMU, and I work in the Office of Equal Opportunity. I've done a lot of DEI work in elevating voices and sharing communications around campus. So I'm hoping to bring those skills to this commission and helping to really build on communication, because would be what I can bring to the
Wonderful. We've got two new people to the community, and those fresh eyes are so important, so important. And can everybody hear? Are you all able to hear? Okay, Susan.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Venable. I am the CEO of Artist Transitions. It's a nonprofit I created approximately 5.5 years ago. Outside of that, I am a community health worker for the Virginia Department of Health, which is a recent position since maybe October of 2021. I am I'm a mother, a wife, grandmother, and what I guess I expect to get out of the commission is I try not to put too many expectations on things. I just kind of just take things. I don't want to go any preconceived ideas of what I think it should look like. So I'm really open to the change that I know that we will make. My thing is I hope that it stays, that it becomes a part of the city. Not that we just create it and then after it's done, that's it. I hope that it kind of it becomes interwoven within the fabric of Stanton in this whole area. So.
Hi, my name is Xavier or Zavia. It really depends on your own accent. I like both of them phonetically and how I go. So let's just go with right, Zavia.
I like that.
I do too. I'm a little bit from everywhere. I have only been in Stanton since August, but originally I was born in New York and moved down to Richmond, then went to school in Bridgewater, so you see I've been bouncing back and forth. So within that, I have experienced so many different viewpoints and communities and seen so many things that I myself feel like I need to be able to understand my surroundings and make a part of it where I can actually help other people, because I just want to know how people think, how people feel. My ideology, supposedly, I'm just that person that's kind of like an observance. But honestly, if I were to actually input myself into any kind of commitment or anything like that, I want to make sure I'm actually doing something. I'm actually helping people instead of just sitting there. So that is why I'm here.
Very good.
I'm Jennifer Trippier. I've lived in the Valley for 42 years, but in Stanton 3, but always interacted with things in Stanton. I grew up, I'm a military brat, So I've lived across the US and in Europe. So had an opportunity to experience a lot of different cultures and ideas, and I find it stimulating to learn and grow from the community that I'm in, wherever that may be. I'm a mother, 2 sons, 7 grandchildren, 23 to 12 days. So quite an age spread.
How many grandchildren?
7.
7, okay. 2 sons.
Yeah, very busy.
Very good.
It's a joy to all of them. And very diverse in who they are, which is really fun to see them come into who they are. I was a registered nurse for 20 odd years and became disabled. Then things seemed to be improving and I went to seminary, surprise, like who, and became disabled again. But I have been able to be engaged in the community on a lot of different things. I chair a group called Reclaim Augusta, and I invite you to follow our page on Facebook. And I'm excited to be here and to be part of this.
What do you aspire to this work?
I hope not only to open my own eyes, but to learn from the community what their needs are and find a way collectively to address those so that everybody feels that they're on an equal footing.
Yeah, can you say your Facebook group again, please?
Reclaim Augusta.
I'm Vicki Kaiser, and I have not had the living around experience. I've been in Stanton, VA for 71 years since the day I was born, except my brief foray to Harrisonburg for JMU. So I didn't go far. But I taught school here for 38 and a half years. And I think that's probably one of my biggest incentives, because my children at school, you know, you learn so much and you love them all. It doesn't matter what color, what religion, what anything. They're all just your kids. And I think I guess because I've been here so long, I'm invested enough or so much in this city. I want it to be the best it can be.
Do you have a particular aspiration, or is that your aspiration? The city to be the best that it can be?
Well, obviously, I think everybody's kind of said everything, and I agree with what she said. And, you know, I think you're not a racist, you're not a blah, 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 but I don't think anybody is purely great about everything. So I know that probably deep inside of me, I mean, I was in school when integration started, and I think I was in 7th grade when the first Black students came to Shelburne. It was my first year there, and 2 children came, and I remember thinking how brave they must be just to be 2 kids in Shelburne, all of Shelburne. And then maybe the next year, I think 7 Black children came into my school. And at that point, we were still like, because everything was so new. And so even though I think I'm golden, I think everybody can grow.
My name is Nathaniel Riddles, or you can call me Nate. I am a native of Rockingham County. I am also newer to the city of Stanton. I moved to the Hampton Roads for college. I moved back and chose Stanton to settle down in. Been here since, I think, July, August last year. I have experience in both healthcare and higher education, 2 very similar industries in some regards, working in DEI initiatives there and operationalizing those concepts, whether it be in the hiring process or admissions or so forth. I think that is what I aspire to do, is to listen to the community, understanding that everyone has a different perspective or different lens of how they experience it, but also hoping our work can become operationalized so we actually have action behind what we do. And you said that in the beginning, and I think that's one of the things that I really loved about the proclamation and so forth, that we don't want to just sit here and talk about these things. We want there to be a lasting change when we're quote unquote done. So I think, and I don't know, I think someone else said, we don't want our work to be done, we want to continue on, but I really want to see action and change come from it. So that's what I'm excited about.
Good, great, thanks, Nate.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Lennon. I am an Augusta County native, moved around just a little bit and then came back and settled in Stanton. So I'm back in Stanton for about 9 years now. Also a sociologist, Cynthia and I work together a little bit. So I'm a researcher and instructor in sociology and psychology at Shenandoah Valley Governor's School in Richardsville. So I've been there for a couple years now. Really, quite frankly, I want to have a community that I'm proud to raise my kids in. I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and my husband and I kind of joke we're always 1 foot out the door. And with recent events, it's a little bit easier to be a foot out the door in our nation. And we feel like we need to stay and be a part of the changes that we want to see happen in our nation and in the world, but particularly in our communities, in a place where we want our kids to be able to have opportunities, but then also be able to grow naturally in a way that has them respecting diversity and inclusion, diversity, all the keywords. So I want to contribute and help in any way I can, and I want to learn. I feel like I'm already learning a lot today. So
Very good. I can relate to that 1 foot out the door. How many of you all think sometimes when you hear what's happening on the news, where can I go? Where can I go that this mess is not going on? Right? So
done
we go-
research.
Right.
That's why I'm here.
I mean, I love that she said that. I think one thing, whole response is like, yeah, this is nothing about, right? But we're gonna stay, and we're gonna do the work to make our communities better.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Anju Nguyen. My pronouns are she, her. I am Executive Director of the Shenandoah LGBTQ Center, and so my parents are refugees of the Vietnam War, but landed in Virginia. So Virginia has been home for me from the very beginning. But I've been in Stanton for a little over 6 years at this point. So I love it here. I do bounce back and forth of like being 1 foot out the door, but this place is home for me. And so what I'm most excited about this commission is it can directly impact the work that I do and advocating on behalf of our community here and making sure they feel seen and heard and affirmed, but just from as a private citizen, again, I'm hugely invested in the future of Stanton and making sure that this is a great community to live in and that we can all thrive in. So that is what I'm hoping.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina Burris. I am the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Arrow Project. So we're a mental health, grassroots mental health organization. I'm a resident in counseling. I am also a longtime community advocate and activist, building spaces where folks who have lived experiences like mine can be resilient and grow and bloom and feel like they belong. And so I also am the mother of 2 sons, and it's very, very important for me that they see that you can do hard work and that hard work can make a difference, particularly again, in light of just sort of like the whole political framework. I think it's easy to just be like, run away. So part of my aspiration here is personal, to show the kiddos who look at me as an example that it's worth doing the work. And then the other part for the community is that, yeah, again, we show up with more than just words. We show up with action, and when we make change happen.
Very good. Thank you, Sabrina. That's important.
I'm Joa Marie Garcia. Y'all can call me Joa. I've lived on the west end of Stanton for the last 3 years, but I've lived in the Augusta County area for about 5 years. I just started my own business last year. I'm an HR consultant, bookkeeper, help out with operations for small businesses in the area. And then I'm also a Girl Scout troop leader for 25 girls K through 7th grade. It'll be in October. So what I'm hoping to get out of this is just to gain more of an understanding about my community and what impact we need to make, and then to just take all of that understanding and make a positive impact.
Right. So I worked with the Girl Scouts as well. I was not a troop leader. I was a cadet, a leader for the 6th to 8th grade cadet. And so I did, I helped several girls get their silver. And I helped 2 get their gold, so I'm pretty proud of that. But yeah, which is quite a lot of work.
Yeah,
So,
a lot of work.
great work. You're
You're
doing
training for that.
I never went again. Sorry, no. Let's not, no sleeping in the tent for me. Are we ready? All right, let's hear a bit, let's watch a video and talk about it on the other side. It's short but good.
Open a door and it opens all the others. Open a mind and see what happens next. No great thing, no beautiful invention was created in a vacuum. It happens when we leave our comfort zone and come together. Embrace faith, cultures, disabilities, differences. Embrace races, ages, ideologies, personalities, creating a tool or device nobody saw coming. Humanity is plural, not singular. The best way the world works is everybody in, nobody out. So who we're made of is everyone. Differences are not just celebrated, but essential. Many more women in charge, equal pay for equal work, everywhere. A new generation of apples, more diverse than the one that came before. Open is not just who we are, but what we believe as a company. Because humanity isn't singular, it's plural. The truth is, we don't see things the same. The power is, we don't see things the same.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Next slide. So that particular video, and you will see a lot of videos that are available, are companies who have leveraged their resources to express the value that they are placing within their organization on diversity, equity, and inclusion. You guys are setting the course today, I hope, for creating your own video in the future. A video that talks about how Stanton, the city of Stanton, represents its own kind of values about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when I look at that video, you can put it in. Yeah, great. The things that stand out for me, that every time I watch it, is we are unique individuals with complex personalities, experiences, and beliefs. And so going into this work, we have to believe that as unique as we are, that's out there in your community. But this is complex work, understanding people's needs, their beliefs, what they bring to the community. I love that despite our differences and uniqueness, we also have a lot of common. And so we're going to be seeking to also find those commonalities. And a lot of the commonalities, we heard them right around the table. People want to live in a community where they feel valued and respected. People want to live in a community where they can raise their children to not feel isolated or objectified, but to feel affirmed and a part of the community's fabric and infrastructure. So where they can feel that they're welcome and they have a sense of belonging and are affirmed. And, you know, I love that when we connect on a deeper level, we discover. So we tend to interact on a very superficial plane throughout most of our interactions. We are just skimming the surface. And from that little bit of a skim of a surface, we make a lot of judgments and a lot of assumptions about who people are and who groups of people are. That's generalization. And so we're gonna go deeper. You're gonna go deeper. And then by modeling that deepness, come up with ideas for how the community can go deeper as well. So I want you to turn to the person next to you and just kind of process that video for a minute. What stood out for you and what would you like to see 3 years from now? Your work is going to have its report in 18 months, but then we're going to do the work, right? We're going to do that work. So what are you hearing in that video that you really are hoping can be captured in kind of the spirit? Like that video was about the spirit of inclusion as you do this work. So talk to the person right next to you. You two are gonna have to squeeze around that hole. I'm gonna give you just 3 minutes, just to kind of debrief that together.
I think one thing that's in a way.
Yeah, well, and I think too, like,
I think one thing I hope it's not just like what they're hopeful to do, it's what they actually really is. I love the way that I don't like that. It's
Just really love.
I'm articulate right now.
I just love that they just get say to me, because I think that it's like, yeah, yeah.
And I agree with you.
To figure out how our differences can with the larger collective. Yeah. And I'm also here
Yeah, I like it.
just Corona. So like, what's the alternative? How do I like, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very nervous, whatever mitigate we still didn't want to have these tools into, you know, like,
Okay. All right, everyone. We can come back together. So we're not going to hear from everyone because of time, but you're going to all get to talk a lot as we go throughout this morning. But I'd love to hear from a couple of you, so I'm just going to point folks, and I'm going to do that throughout the day because I find that when I say who wants to talk, there's too long of a pause. and you guys are just going to get used to talking to each other, so I'm just going to point folks. And so I'm going to come over here to Ruth and Mark. Anything you want to share from your conversation about what you took away from the video and what you might want to kind of see represented in this work based on the idea of that kind of inclusion?
I think we saw a lot of people and heard a lot of voices, different voices, and we heard all of those voices. And in Stanton, we have a lot of different people and a lot of different voices. We want to hear all of those voices.
Yeah. Very good. So how to elevate and create space for more people to be at the table of process in Stanton. Yeah. Okay. Good. How about Vicki and Nate?
Way to take it. Well, I discussed the two phrases, and I can't remember them exactly because I went by so quickly, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And humanity is plural.
Yeah.
So we really discussed just how broad we do have to have our perspectives. We really do have to listen to the heartbeat of the community and everyone, not just our perspective, right? Not just our backing. But then I think Vicki made a good point about the change that we want to see and the action that we want to see, but it's not going to happen overnight. A lot of these things are deep rooted into our communities. You mentioned being generational, which is, I think, very true. So I think it's going to be easy to get frustrated with these things. Sometimes we're going to hit resistance, but I think knowing our charge, knowing our why, as we went around and shared, will help us, I think, prevail.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. So next slide. So, you know, this work is going to require that you develop a certain level of competence. So I always tell folks that commission work, DEI work isn't, it's not something that we all know how to do. We're not born knowing how to serve on the board, how to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it is in fact a competency. It is a skill that you have to learn and that you have to cultivate, and you have to believe that just what you may know intuitively is not enough. And it starts with us examining our own attitudes, beliefs, values, and lived experiences. And, you know, really determining where there are strengths there and where there are weaknesses or falsehoods or flaws in what we are in fact bringing to the table. And then really working to acquire skills, knowledge, aptitude, capacity, and the ability to understand this information from a lens, right? When we say lens, we mean lenses, both a cognitive lens, but it's also an openness that we heard on the video that allows us to really evaluate people, conditions, situation, data, circumstances from an unbiased perspective. And we're going to talk about bias. So next slide. There really is a learning journey, and there really are places where we are stuck and where we have to go. So this is just one representation of how I often look at where people are on the journey, and you're going to meet people out in the community at different levels of this journey. So this is an intercultural mindset perspective. So a mindset is the way in which we frame our understanding of situations. And this is a mindset of how we frame interracial, multicultural diversity. Some people have a mindset that is at the denial level. So the denial level is someone who would say, I don't see color. I don't see differences. And they say it with great pride, I don't see color. Well, in fact, that's denial. Because we want you to see color. We want you to see the differences. Because if you don't see the differences that I am a Black woman and you are an Asian woman, or you are a Latino, or you are a Black male, then you are not going to be able to really value the lived experiences, the ways in which my life is different in the same world and community than yours. And so in denial, people are not really wanting to focus on the truth. That's what denial is, right? We're not going to see the truth. We're going to live in this kind of perspective that makes the individual feel very comfortable. The next level is polarization. Are we seeing a lot of polarization now? Yes. Polarization feels like where America is at this point, at least from a political perspective, where polarization basically says that there's competition. Polarization says that there is an adversarial relationship, that I win and you lose. If I'm on top, you have to be on the bottom. That if I'm the winner, you have to be the loser. That if I'm right, that must mean you're wrong. Well, no, it could be right and right. It could be winners and winners. But polarization creates this perspective that there is really only one right direction or way to go. And we're seeing that a lot currently. And there are people who have a polarized mindset. The next is minimization. Minimization is a mindset where we de-emphasize differences because, well, it doesn't really matter. You know, we just want everybody to get along. It's okay. He or she didn't mean that. You know, so a minimization mindset. If you've talked to people like that who really, you know, feel that that is having a good heart, but in fact, what they're doing is that they're not acknowledging both the strengths or the challenges that exist in a community, that exist in each of us, that exist in how we view all myriad levels of diversity, whether it's economic, educational, cognitive thinking, or it's the demographic diversity of age and gender and race. Acceptance is where a lot of us likely are. Acceptance is the place where we do really deeply comprehend differences, but the challenge with acceptance is that you're still not always as agile and fluid and adapting. So how do I deal with in an applied way, like we said, how do I operationalize it? How do I show up in a way that I actually accept someone else's culture? So an example I have of that is when you travel internationally, for those of you who travel internationally, if you go to, I went to Dubai, to a very Muslim based country, and where women have a certain role in a certain place, in a certain way of dress. And so when we got there, one thing we always carried with us was a wrap. We carried a wrap that was large enough to cover our heads, to cover our arms, and we carried a sweater so that we could put the sweater on to cover fully. Now, I'm American, so I can say, I don't do that. I don't have to do that, because that's not our culture. But when I'm in another culture and I'm respecting their culture, then I respect the way in which I should show up to interact with them. It doesn't mean that I'm abandoning my own beliefs, but it means that I am acknowledging who you are. And there are other cultures similar to that that are very nuanced here. When you go to someone's home, for example, in the South, and they offer you a glass of tea, they offer you a slice of pie, they ask you to sit down. You do it. Okay? You just do. I went to St. Paul's Island to visit a dear friend's 96-year-old dad. I was in St. Paul's Island working with another group, and I said, I'm going to go see your dad while I'm here. And I go in the afternoon to visit her dad. He comes to the door and he invites me in and he says, come on back. And he said, have a sit. Let me get you something. And I said, no, Reverend, you don't have to get me anything. No, I want to get you something. So of course I let him get me something. He went and got me a glass of water. And then what else? You have to be prepared to stay. You don't say, I'm just going to run by a 96-year-old Southern minister's home and think you're going to come in and just abruptly go, okay, like I might repeat, or I'm just stopping by, I got to go home. No, I'm going to stay. This is adaptation. Adaptation is being able to know the differences that each culture, each race, each gender needs and respond to that in a respectful and a light way. And we have to be adaptive. And so that's our journey. This is just one example. You may find another example that fits for you. And I welcome you to do that, and I welcome you guys to kind of share that as well with each other as you do your reading. But this is one that I know and that I like. Next slide. And I want you to think about where you are as you go through this journey of understanding where you are in your own learning journey. Melody Hobson, this is not quite her quote. I have so changed this quote. So I'm going to post it. This quote, we've done quite a few things with it. But the bottom line is, a third rail conversation is, on the train track, the third rail that will electrocute you. In America, we have managed to make talking about our diversity and who we are a very tense topic. I'm sure you can all think of many experiences where you've been in a work setting back, okay, some of you are young, so you didn't have it back in the day. This is like you're back in the day now. But for those who are a little older, back in the day, do you have a back in the day experience?
I was just going to say, can I argue that and say yes?
Yeah.
When we're speaking to someone that's a few years younger, or like maybe they're still in college, and they're like, I don't understand that reference. And you're like, oh gosh, I'm old.
I had an intern, and she and I started a fun thing where every time I said a thing that she had never heard, she wrote it. And we were going to do a book. We were going to do a book on generational colloquialisms and things. Because I would say things and she would go, no. And then she'd come to work the next day and go, I Googled what you said yesterday. And this is what it means. Right. Yes, we have all had conversations that have gone bad. And that's what happened here. We're going to have conversations where people are going to believe it's gone bad. It went to the third rail. Someone is going to feel hurt. Someone is going to feel offended. Sometimes people are still harmed from bad conversations. I mean, they are still personally harmed because there have been many flawed attempts to center diversity, equity, inclusion, and differences in groups that have been hurtful to people. So my intent today, and I hope your intent, is to uplift information that may be information that is not positive, but information that is shared in a way that is not harmful. And so we have to distinguish the difference, that we are gonna talk about things that, because of the nature of how these events and the state of our current situation, these are really not positive stories. This is not positive data. This is not uplifting. But to do it in a way where individuals don't feel blamed and don't feel harmed. So, and we also need, so there's a book that Robin DiAngelo wrote called White Fragility. And this book is about the tendency for white Americans, and in this room, we can say white Americans, we can say Black, we can say Asian, we can affirm all of the diversities, because that's another thing where people, like, you can't say white or Black. Yes, you can. If you can't say white or Black, or affirm how you would like to be called African American, or persons of color, or white Americans. I tell white Americans all the time, white is a diversity. It is. So we affirm that you bring a diversity to the mix of everything that we need around the table. So we have to be able to affirm all of this and say it in a way and have a tolerance for our own discomfort, so that we know that we're not trying to injure one another, but we may feel uncomfortable. And those who you're talking to in the community may feel uncomfortable as well. But the goal is not to leave folks injured, but to recognize that these are hard conversations to have. Does that make sense? So it's really, it's a balance. It's a fine line. And you're gonna figure out in this room who's got the right skill set for leading a certain conversation, and then who's the right middle person to come in and frame the question, and then who's the right kind of person that has the tone to soothe if things get kind of tense. You're all gonna have a different ability to help manage that third rail that many people are gonna experience. And no one person, which is the beauty of this, is gonna have to do it all. It's gonna have to, kind of rebuild if things go in the wrong direction. Next slide. So let's talk about where we are. And a lot of the reasons why there's a resurgence really in a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've had some really challenging times over the last few years. It's been hard. It still is hard. It's just like we just keep getting pounded with issues and incidents and violence, both verbally, physically, tragically murders. So in 2020, it was just event after event that led us all to a place of really feeling that we were isolated, feeling a lot of despair about how our country and where our country is going in regards to our community of being able to embrace differences and respect one another and to feel safe and to have this thing we're going to call equity, and that we're going to demonstrate inclusion. So between COVID, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, just to name a few that year, the economic downturn, next slide, the understanding that, people of color, the people who are making the lowest amount of income in our community, the most vulnerable, were the ones who were on the front line, didn't have technology or access to technology. I mean, even the assumption by each of our states and even the Department of Education, the Cabinet of Education of the United States, the initial assumption that we can just learn from home, kids can just learn from home, is just so blatantly flawed with a lack of understanding about inequity. That a family that has 4 children and 1 computer is going to be able to allow 4 children to be in class, in separate class at the same time. that all neighborhoods have internet, that all people can afford the internet. The assumptions point out the depth of the lack of understanding and planning ongoing for equity. And empathy. Oh, absolutely, and empathy. Empathy was greatly lacking in all of this, all of this. And we saw throughout all of this, the challenges with domestic safety, the increase in health challenges and in mental health challenges throughout our country, but those who are the most vulnerable and the most fragile having even deeper and more tragic outcomes as a result of this. And then, of course, the social safety net failures have been tremendous, have been catastrophic in communities for people who rely on Meals on Wheels and school lunches and breakfasts and free health clinics and all of the things, senior programs. It amazes me to this day, my mother-in-law's senior center is still not open. And I'm going, what is going on? What is going on? But the city still to the, I mean, come on, everything is open. Like, we're here, people are out to dinner, people in the airports are overflowing, and the senior center is still not open. So many seniors are still at home, isolated, depressed. Many have died in that because of those isolations, in that depression. So this is created for us an understanding of the broad and pervasive community disparities. Now, the good news is that many of us already knew this. And then we started to hear other people talk about it. Now, the sad news is that in many instances, the way in which it was framed as if it was those individuals' fault. There was no connection to the systemic nature of disparities, because our broader political voices and don't really say the word systemic. So that in fact, communities where there are disparities don't have disparities because the people in that community have done something wrong. They have disparities because of historic inequities and a lack of investment and systemic bias and racist policies, practices, and operations that have led to these disparities. And so that's what you guys are going to be really trying to understand. We know all these things exist. Next slide. So this is the example of the polarization of what we're working against. So we're working against not having this left versus right versus center, you know, this liberal versus conservatism, all these things that are up here on this slide. We're working towards, and you're not gonna, I just tell you, just don't even address things like when people say this critical race theory, just don't even address it. No, this has nothing to do with what we're doing. But these are the kinds of things that are going to be thrown at you as you do this work. You know, the kinds of questions that many who come to your listening session may be there with the intent of, you know, more being disruptive than of being a part of the process because of the polarization of these kinds of conversations. Next slide. So I love this slide because this is where a lot of folks are. You're like, there's nothing wrong. All the data is showing there's a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot right, so we're going to uncover what's right. There's a lot wrong. But you know, if we don't do anything, then something magical is going to happen. It doesn't happen. Next slide. So let's start talking about some shared understanding. Next. So this is like a little kaleidoscope I tried to create because I'm going to go through each of these definitions with you individually, but these all work together. We have to create an understanding and stances where diversity is affirmed and acknowledged, where inclusive voices of those particularly who are who have been marginalized and who have persistently been left out of the conversations and out of decision-making, where equity and justice and belonging all coexist together. And my work has shown me that many people feel that when you achieve diversity, you have hit a home run. You have not. You just have a room full of different people. But you haven't achieved much other than an assembly. And we've all been to assemblies. You just all sit in your chair, but there's no connection. And so we want to go beyond that and to create those things that I have on this slide in a representative and in an operational way. Next. So, what is diversity? Diversity is it is all these things we see in the trees, which is kind of what the typical person looks at. But diversity is really deeper, and we can't often know many of the things that you see in the roots there until you really create meaningful and safe and in-depth relationships with people, where they share with you things about their gender identity, or if they suffer from PTSD from military experience or some type of mental health trauma. And I'll tell you, with my own dad, many people tell you my dad's a Korean War veteran. He never talked about the Korean War. I never knew that he really had PTSD until my dad was over 80. And then when certain incidents happened as he got older, he got more vulnerable, he actually demonstrated that vulnerability through PTSD. And it was really scary and alarming. We never knew that as a family, because that was deeper in his roots. And we had not gone deep. We hadn't asked. And so that's what happens. So how someone's immigration status is impacting their lives. So all of these things are a part of diversity. It is not just our skin color, our body size, our ethnicity, our age. Those are important factors, but they are not the total factor of what makes each of us who we are and what makes each of us individually diverse, which is why we don't generalize, because one African-American woman is very different from another. Next slide. So we've got demographic diversity, which I just talked about. And these are the things that we are most typically thinking when we think of diversity, and that we do want to affirm and we want to look at and we want to have a part of the conversation. Next slide. But we also want to focus in this room and with those you talk to about cognitive diversity. This is how we think. So, and often I wonder how we think. Does it come from just our experiences and the ways in which we work in our community? It comes from our family, right? It comes from the way in which we have worked or strived to move to another place, and our learning and our perspectives. And it comes from the way in which we live our lives. And where many people say, when I became a parent, it changed the way I think. It changes the way I see the world. That drives your cognitive understanding of information. And we want to tap into all that. Several of you introduce yourself as parents, as mothers, as grandparents, because that's a part of who you are, and that has a lot to do with how you think. So the cognitive and the demographic makes up the diversity for that aspect of diversity. Next slide. So when you're talking to each other and when you're out there, you're going to want to know, you're going to have a broad sample of folks who bring both cognitive and demographic diversity in these listening sessions you're going to have. In the listening sessions, you're going to have a little bit more of an advantage because you're going to really be able to go to communities, and you're going to really be able to hopefully work with community partners. So those of you all who We got a couple folks who said that you are already grassroots advocates, so you know how to get community partners to the table, so that you have this broad representation of interests and ideas and lived experiences and expertise and background. And so you're saying to them, it's not just that we want an assembly of people who look different. We want an assembly of people whose lived experiences and life and perspectives and understanding is also different. Because that's when we're going to really understand what each views as the state of Stanton and the concerns in Stanton. And where you're going to be able to take your data that you've gathered and ask real focused questions to help you understand the data. Okay? So next slide. So this gets to that surface that I talked to you about. And this is how a lot of communities deal with diversity right now. Festivals. I like festivals, they're fun. I like going to eat, you know, buying them different food, and give me a pair of earrings, and you know, that's all good. But that's not what we need. We need to really understand more about the people in each of our diverse communities. I just came from Harrisonburg, and they have a very strong refugee community. They have very immigrant communities. So I'm interested in hearing from you guys, how does your diversity look like here? Are people living in cultural segregated pockets? Are they, is diversity broader than white or Black, Latino, due to the community, long-term in the community? What kinds of diversity and range do you have here? Who is in and who's been out? So these are the kind of things that we're gonna really want to understand better. So for example, does Stanton have a large immigration community, an immigrant community, a refugee community? What do you all know, just from your own experience, about the kind of communities and cultures that are here within the city of Stanton?
I have some Hispanic friends who I have been to their houses, I've eaten with them, I've worked with them, and from what they've told me, that there is not much representation for Spanish-speaking people in this community. There's not many resources, there's not many outreach or even materials that you can get, just pamphlets from the library, from stores, help, anything like that. And I've also been to Harrisonburg, and I have had that culture shock. And I would say that I'm still going through a culture shock of how people react differently and how people are treated, and just strangers coming up to you and being nice to you for random reasons. That is definitely something I'm still working with, because I have never had that growing up, and still seeing that here, or rather not seeing that culture shock is what really drives me to have to look into myself and realize, okay, this is how I would react if I was in a different community. I'm here, so how should I react? And how can I get myself to not just react, but that's just become actually who I am.
What other things? What are you all other experiencing regarding intercultural, immigrant, refugee? What's present that you know of? We're going to use the data in the listening sessions to get more information, but I'm curious about, in terms of the iceberg, what's really happening at a deeper level here in Stanton? Yeah.
Well, earlier, I totally forgot to tell you all, my family, my roots are here. My grandparents moved here from Highland County. My parents were actually born and raised here, and I grew up in the DC metro area. And coming down here as a child, I adored this place because it was different. I had more freedom years. My parents were like, had a chokehold on me in DC. But as soon as I would come down here, I didn't see them the entire weekend. That was when I had to walk all through town and everything. And a lot of people were very friendly to me as a child. But as an adult coming back, I see extreme differences in economically, housing. There's a lot of, we have something called an Alice report here.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I know about Alice, I don't have that in Slack, but yes, you guys will probably use Alice in your name.
Yes, so you see those disparities in this small area, which is alarming to me. And we can do better, and we should have done better already, but here we are. But there are pockets here. A lot of people who are impoverished, you know, and it's kind of, okay, just be quiet about that. They're working dead-end jobs where they, they don't feel valued and things. And so there you go with the self-esteem and the drug use and the, and the lack of education and all that goes with it. But so yes, we do have pockets here of extremely impoverished people who are kind of, yes, you can visually see it on Beverly Street because you have the mission, the Valley Mission. Okay, yes, that's very visible. But when you start going back into within the communities, there's pockets of people who are just not doing well. And yeah, that's it. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. And the Alice report, for those of you all who don't know, is data that the United Way spearhead and gathering for specific communities who are participating in the Alice Project, which basically is a report that talks about people who are working and they are slightly above the poverty level, right? So that means they don't qualify for HUD housing or any kind of government assistance. But being slightly above the poverty level and not getting any assistance means that you spend the bulk, if not all of your money on your basic needs. And really, in many communities, do not have enough to meet basic needs. Do not have enough to pay rent, utilities, buy food, pay for daycare, gas, any of the things. And this is even before inflation, right? So now with inflation, I mean, this is just absolutely traumatic and devastating for families who are at the Alice level because they really do not qualify. And the Alice level is so low because the poverty level is so low in this country. And each state sets their own poverty level. And I will tell you that Virginia's poverty level, the South in general, has set a poverty level that is significantly lower than the federal poverty level. So, and I don't know about Virginia, but I looked up, and I have to look it up for you guys, but I looked at the Alice level for South Carolina because I was there last. And if you made more than $5,000 in South Carolina, you are not considered poor. Oh, wow. The poverty level is like $5,700 something. That's amazing. Insane. And so why would a state do that? Because they don't want to offer any assistance. They don't want to help you. They don't want to help. I mean, basically they're saying, we're not. So that would be a question for you guys. Do you know the poverty level? Does anyone know the poverty level in Virginia?
I knew it here. Kind of the window, I think it was like 48%, right? Sabrina.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
That was back in like 2018, right?
So I think that's something to put on your list that you're gonna research, is your Alice data and your poverty level. Yes.
What is that do you know what that, whatever it is, what is that as a percentage of the federal? That would help me to think about it.
You know what?
I'm not really,
So generally, there's a federal policy level, and then states are able to create their own policy level because the federal policy level doesn't take into account the cost of living in each state. So the poverty level in California should be a higher, right? Because the cost of living is higher. And then in the South, which is no longer true, it is not cheap to live in the South anymore. You know, people go, oh, you live in the South, you live. No, it is not cheap to live in the South at all. So the poverty levels have been set, I think, egregiously low, at levels that really are not even realistic for what it takes for people to live. Yeah.
The federal poverty level is usually set by low-cost food budget times 3, whatever it is for the month. That food budget they determine each year, and then they times that by 3, and that's the poverty level.
Okay.
But I don't know how that then reflects into
into the Alice and into the state. Yeah. Okay.
So whatever minimum that you can get by with for a family of 1, 2, and multiplies.
Okay.
It's probably around, you know, family of 4, it's probably around 20,000 and change.
Yeah, exactly. They're
I don't know if I tried
exactly right.
right.
It is around that level, around 24. So I can tell you, I'm remembering in Ohio with my parents, years ago when I was thinking, okay, we got to get them out of this house, what are we going to do? And my parents are, you know, older, poor Black people. You know, my father was a working class person. My mom was a teacher's assistant. They didn't make a lot of money. They didn't inherit any money. And we'll talk about Black wealth and wealth of people of color. And so often you get to retirement and you have Social Security and you are lucky in their generation, and still even now, you have a very teeny pension possibly, but maybe not. And so many elderly are at the poverty level. They are at the poverty level. Our elderly are a very vulnerable group that you guys are going to have to think about, and you're going to have to look at. The inequities that exist are profound and are very devastating for them. And so what you're saying reminded me, Lindsay, of when I was looking at that from my parents, because we wanted some home improvements. And a lot of these federally funded home improvement programs use poverty level. And I think my parents were like $5,000 over or something. And I was like, you kidding me? Like, this is not considered poor in America? Not poor enough, but not enough money to keep your home in good repair, to pay your bills, to buy your groceries, to pay for your medication, to do all the things that we know mounts with seniors, right? That mounts with seniors who are no longer working and have a fixed and set income and have a home that has declining, infrastructure. So these are things along this age range. The same issue of poverty is going to mean something different for a young single mom of 3 in an elderly retired couple or person. The same data, we have to look at it from both perspectives to understand what those inequities are. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I look a lot at like wages around this area. I'm not sure about the Alice number, but the MIT living wage for Stanton, Augusta, Rockingham, it's around $31,000. I work at JMU right now, which is a big public university. The housekeepers there who are state employees, the average salary for a full-time housekeeping worker at a state employment job is around $26,000. So here we have a state job paying less than what the actual living wage is.
Yeah.
And that's just for a single person, 31%.
So that frame is so important, Jason. There are many cities and municipalities who are pushing for living wage equity adjustments. That might be something that is a way of framing exactly what comes out of this work. That is a tremendous way of showing where those inequities are. And then who are the people who are working most often in those positions where they are not being paid at the state's identified living wage? Who are those people? What are the demographics of those people? and what's the historic demographics of the people who've been in those positions. And then you're showing really a trend that is creating generational poverty in the same in certain communities. So that's an excellent way of framing how to think about it as well. So we've got the state, MIT, we've got the ALICE, we've got the federal poverty level, many ways to begin to think about what contributes to and what is driving many of the inequities that are happening in San Francisco.
I'm a disabled citizen and past retirement age, and I live in a community, I live in is for elderly, 55 and older, and a large majority of us are disabled in one way or another. Disability community makes up about 25% of the community. And also because of being disabled, poverty is that's a common thing. So there are multiple things that impact a lot of folks. And out of awareness, I was at a meeting recently and people were talking about Stanton is wonderful, and it is, but it's a walkable city. And I went, no, it isn't. We have hills everywhere. There are no benches for the disabled to sit and rest. You know, when the Beverly Street is closed on the weekend, we can't get up the hill to shop and dine. And it's, you know, little things like that that do impact people and set us apart.
Thank you for sharing that. Because the people are mostly looking at it from their own perspective.
Right, yeah, we all do that. We all do
That's
that.
why we use your lens here, to look at it from the perspective of a person who is living with a disability and what that experience is like for you. So let's jump into some definitions. Yes, Lou.
Yeah, just to add one more thing to this whole generational discussion.
Yeah.
I'm a product of the 60s. I was born in 47, which makes me probably closer to your grandfather's age than your age. But I came from nothing. I grew up in a housing project in the Bronx, New York, and worked my way through college. I had opportunities to dig out that don't exist today. My sons have not had the opportunity that I had. If we could not have helped them because we had opportunity and we had success, I don't know where they would be right now. And making the generation closer to me understand that those opportunities currently do not exist is a big thing, because they're sitting there scratching their heads going, well, I got out of it, why can't you? The fact is that we're not there anymore. This is a different world.
Very good point. I agree. So let's just talk about a few definitions real quick, and then we're going to take a little break. So first of all, race. Race is what we call a construct, meaning that there's no really valid data that differentiates any individual person from another in terms of our biological makeup. Race was designed and developed as a way to identify people and to put us into social classes, into social groups. So it is a construct. It's a way of thinking. We know race doesn't exist because I could probably give Beth a kidney and I couldn't give it to my sister. I might be her match. So culture is real, ethnicity is real, nationality is real. All of those things are real, but there's only the human race. And then we are a product of our nationality, our cultures, our ethnicity. Now, we deal with race because it is the construct in which we live. So we do deal with it. We can't ignore it. We can't say that it doesn't exist. And I've got two sociologists in the room, so I'm gonna lean on you guys to help. I've never had that before. Anything you want to rewrite on this slide, you go right ahead. So we still have to deal with it because that's the way in which our community see us. They see me as a Black person and they think that that defines my race. Right? When it doesn't define my race. In fact, I consider myself more African American. I've done, but many don't. You can ask a Black person, some say I'm a Black person. Black actually, it's just a skin color. It's just a color. Like Black people are everywhere, right? There's Black people in every country. There are people who are brown, Black, tan, and all different variations of color. And that color on your skin is a color. It's like an attribute, I think. It's what makes us beautiful, but it does not define who we are. But we know that there are people who define you based upon that exterior. And so beginning to think about how you view that and what you do about it is really important. So our sociologists, do you guys have anything you want to correct? I mean, feel comfortable like contradicting me.
That's it. I mean, that's great. Race is tough.
Race is tough.
Because it is real. And yet when you say that, people believe that you're talking about the skin color and you're not. Right. You're talking about people's minds.
Right.
That's very difficult.
It is very difficult. Yeah, thank you. Next slide.
May I include something as well?
Uh-huh.
I do like that you acknowledge that not everyone considers themselves the common term, such as African American. Some people, I do like that you mentioned that internal racism within your own race. For example, I myself, I do not consider myself African American. I consider myself mixed and Black because I've never been to Africa. That is no longer the identity of my home. And this country doesn't feel like home to me either. So it's not like I'm giving up on my history. It's more of, I don't understand how it connects to me anymore.
Okay. And so that's a part of your story and your journey. And then maybe 10 years from now, you've kind of sorted a lot of things out and you have a different way of seeing yourself. But the important thing is how do we each identify and feel and allowing people to name that and not lump people into a certain category, like the U.S. Census does. These are our categories, folks. This is how the U.S. Census sees us. So we know that when you look at data, you're not going to really get true data, is my point with this slide. You're going to get what the U.S. government sets as buckets, right? But those buckets don't truly represent all of the diversity that is within Stanton and that is within America. Next slide. And the U.S. Census came out with a report. And of course, it was soon thereafter revealed that the 2020 census overestimated the number of white Americans and underestimated the number of Black and people of color. But that's okay because we've been doing that for years. Really, what's the answer? The response was, it's bad, but we always overestimate the number of white Americans and underestimate the number of Black and Americans of color.
Why are they estimating when they have the count?
Well, they have the count, but the count, well, they not estimating, gather. There is also, I think, some actuarial process that occurs as well in the census that from the actual counts that there is some other factors that they use to come up with what they think the growth or the percentages. I'm not an expert on that. I can only tell you the report and the response of the New York Times was, yes, the numbers are inflated for white Americans and underrepresented for Black and people of color. And we've done that ever since.
So that's okay.
So that's okay.
It's done.
We didn't fix it yet. So this is the census data from 2000, comparing 2010 to 2020. And what you'll see is race alone changes from 2010 For the white race declined, for the Black race kind of just held steady, for the American Indian and Alaskan just went up a little. So you'll see that the race alone kind of stays low. 2 or more races from 2010 increased, but the biggest increase is the race in combination. So the multiculturalism, the multiracial in America is growing. That's what's growing in America. The singular race alone is not growing. It's either declining or it's barely making any incremental any incremental gains. So we are becoming and are a more multi-racial, multi-ethnic world, which is why there's an estimate, I don't know, the year 2065 or something like that, where people of color are going to be the dominant number by that time. And you can see that in the change. Next slide. So this is Virginia, 2020 census data. Your population was up by 7.4%. Your race and ethnicity for white alone is about 61% in the state, Black is 12%, Hispanic is 18%. But you'll see what's really interesting here is that the 2 or more races is 10%, that the diversity index is 61.1%, which is up from 54.9. So diversity overall in Virginia is growing. Now, what's declining in Virginia is the under 18, which means people having their children in Virginia, and the adult population is up. So fewer children under 18, more adults, more diversity. So I don't know, I have to look at the Stanton data to see how Stanton compares to nationally, to Virginia, and what's happening here in terms of your decline. So I worked with a city in South Carolina, Spartanburg, South Carolina. And also what we looked at there is we looked at how the city was retaining its young adults when they graduate from high school, how the city was retaining or gaining individuals of color in leadership positions who have bachelor's or associate degrees. And what they saw was that young people of color will lead in the city in droves. That young people of color who had bachelor's degrees or associate degrees, who left and went away to college, never came back. So they saw that their companion city, Greenville, South Carolina, did not have that same data experience. They were retaining young people. They were attracting people of color and young people with associates and bachelor's degrees. And these cities are kind of the distance of you to Harrisonburg. And so they had to say to themselves, what's happening in our city where we are in fact declining in all of the things that help to make a city sustainable, and our neighboring city is thriving. So you're going to want to take a look at really what's happening here, not just with the census number, but with multiple variables of what we know creates a thriving city. And are there inequities, or are there a sense of belonging? Are there a lack of opportunities and inclusion that contribute to the decline in the kind of benchmarks that we know lead to thriving communities? Right? Another example is that child birth rate. That same community I went to, St. Pauli's Island, they no longer deliver babies in the whole county. If you want to have a baby, you better go to Charleston. Because they were delivering about 300 babies a year. But some hospitals deliver 300 babies in a day. They were doing 300 babies a year. And they just couldn't keep up their competencies. They couldn't keep their malpractice insurance. They just didn't think it was feasible. So that is a decline that's saying, wow, you know, we're not growing here. We're aging. This is the city of people who are aging and not growing because we don't have enough people here who are even having children. So here's some other like health benchmarks and kind of benchmarks that you are going to be able to dive into that are going to really help you see what's happening here versus your comparison cities. And you're going to want to have some comparisons so that you can see, really what's happening external. Because really a data point means nothing if you're not benchmarking against something else. Because then you really don't know, is this good or bad, right? So you're going to want to have some benchmarks. Next. So gender diversity, really again, is the way in which we identify our gender. And, many folks are still learning how to understand that, which is why we ask you your pronoun. Your pronoun, people say, why do you want to know my pronoun? Why do you ask that? It's because we create safe space for people who want to share a pronoun that does not mirror how you see them. And if they're the only ones continually saying, I know I look like a she, her, but I'm a they, them, then that creates a difference in how I'm being treated. But if everyone is identifying their pronoun, then it becomes a part of our inclusive norm, our process. So get to know these pronouns, get to know these gender identities, spend some time understanding and researching and figuring out how you believe about them so that you can ask and understand the right ways in which to talk to folks in your community that have these different genders, different ways of identifying their gender. Next slide. The same thing with LGBTQ+, we're all very familiar with lesbian, gay, bisexual, but there are many other aspects of how people identify their sexual identity and how that has a bearing on how they live their lives and how they need a community that creates inclusiveness and belonging for them. And how many folks feel that they can't be their authentic selves because they are at risk. They're at risk for losing their jobs. They're at risk for losing access to power in their community. And so even today, depending upon the community, the situation, there are people who are still not open because they don't feel safe in their community to be open. We do know that there are still hate crimes against people in the LGBTQ+ community, the most vulnerable in the community, and I'm not an expert on this. I love this group, I love this group. Everything I can talk about, I can run with them. Your next one. You guys have got it going on. But is trans is one of our most vulnerable communities, in particular, African-American trans. So this is something that I want you to learn more about as well, so that you'll be able to understand the representation of this community in Stanton and what their lives are like, what their lived experiences are like, what barriers they're experiencing, how inclusion and belonging and power and voice needs to be a part of your understanding for them. Is there anything I need to add on that? Next slide. Religion, we saw that in our video. I don't know what religious affiliations or groups or communities you have here in Stanton, but I'm sure that they are more than you imagine. And so we want to understand that, understand how that is expressed and how that is part of the culture and of the acceptance as well. Next slide. We talked a little bit about those who are living with various disabilities or handicaps. I'm going to give you guys an article called The Curb Cut Effect. So if we can remember that. Can you write down things I say in question? Wonderful. Because I spew things out and then later I go like, I can't remember, I'm writing off some theater. So The Curb Cut Effect is an amazing article You can find it online. It's written by Angela Glover, who was the founder of Policy Week, and now she's the founder of Emeritus. And it is an article that talks about the origination of curb cuts in the sidewalk, and how curb cuts really represent a way of viewing equity that in fact brought equity in access to mobility for many, many people. So the curb cut was designed and originally in San Francisco, lobbied, became a law. But what they did was they went back and they did a study, and they watched all types of people using the sidewalk to see how likely were they to just come on the street and step up on the curb or go out of their way to the curb cut. And they found that not only did people who were in wheelchairs or who had different abilities use curb cuts, but parents pushing baby strollers use curb cuts. A delivery guy delivering beer to the local pub and one of those properties uses a curb cut. That someone riding their bike uses a curb cut. So the curb cut didn't just benefit the individuals who were living with disabilities. The curb cut benefited everyone. They even saw that able-bodied walking individuals went out of their way to use a curb cut rather than step up on a curb. And so what we know is that when people push back on initiatives that drive equity, the response is that equity benefits all of us. When there is an improvement that happens in our systems, our structures, and our operations that may be designed because of the need or the identified issue of one population or group, in fact, we all benefit from those changes. And so it's a great article. It gives you a frame or a way of talking about how improvement for one is an improvement for all. So we'll make sure you get that. Next slide. So I was going to have you debrief this in Paris. We don't have time. We're so behind. It's 11:03. I wanted to take a break. So I'm going to give you like a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to plow through to the next. Okay? All right.
Better than any podcasts I've listened to while driving down the road. You guys are awesome.
This know each other. That's awesome. So let's jump back to So let's talk about inclusion. So inclusion is more than having people, it's more than diversity, and it's more than just inviting folks to sit at the table. Inclusion is intentionally determining who needs to be in. So, and making sure that people who traditionally are not given voice, are not participating, are invited at the table, and that there is space created for their voice to be a part of critical decision-making processes that lead to outcomes. Quite often, organizations go to any part of that, but not the decision-making, not the power, and not the outcome. So, sure, letting someone participate in a survey is a really great thing. But when you get to analyze the survey results and decide what happens. So how about having people participate in the survey and having them talk to you about what you believe you've learned from the survey, and talk to you about what they believe should happen as next steps, and be a part of the process of making sense and making recommendations and finalizing decisions. So we often do one step of the process, but still claim all the analysis, the making sense of it, which is why we always wonder, like, when we hear polls and results and stuff, and we go, who are they talking to? Like, who? I always think when I hear results, I'm going, who was a part of that? Who were they talking to? Because no one I know believes or thinks this way. And that's because people are not at the table to really provide input that makes the results, the outcomes, the decisions, the interpretation relevant to a larger group of people than those who traditionally are having power. And let's face it, the people who are traditionally having power are typically men still, are typically white men still, are typically people with certain economic income levels, power, are people with certain positional power. So those kinds of typical policymakers, thinkers, are not inclusive of the large majority, even at that level. So if you don't have that inclusiveness there and you don't intentionally create inclusiveness anywhere in your process, you continue to get interpretations from a lens and a perspective of people who just don't hear the voices and don't have the voices of a diverse group of people. And so what's built into this process is inclusion. Now you guys have to make it happen, because you can show up to a listening session and you don't have the inclusion there. You don't have the participants there. And so you guys are going to have to make sure that people know that this is more than numerical, that we really want empowered participation. We really want them to know that there is a true sense of belonging for them to be at this table and to talk to you all and to share their experiences. And that as they participate in a survey, they're going to get to come back and hear the results and talk to you about what should happen and give recommendations. And that you just don't want, there's a concept called exploitation. Exploitation is when we only center asking people about their experiences. And then we use what they said to make our own meaning and our own decisions. So people are kind of used as guinea pigs, like, oh, just tell me what your lived experiences are. What's happening to you in this part of town? How did you, end up retired with no income, blah, blah, blah. That's exploitation. People don't just want to be used as an othering, like I am a representative of this other group. What we want is for those voices to be genuinely a part of the understanding, the sense-making, the analysis, and the decisions that come out of this group. You would be doing this work a sincere disservice if you do not think about how to build in that sense-making and decision-making process and opportunity. Okay? So that's going to be really critical, that you think through how that happens, or you fall in the lane of, really exploiting people's pain and experiences and challenges, but not giving them power and a way to help shape the future and the next step.
Yes. I'm thinking that you mean things like what things would be helpful to you, or how do you think things can? Okay.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Perfect. Next slide. So we talked about belonging. I've used this word a lot. Belonging is coupled with welcoming. Belonging is the sense that I feel that I can show up and I can be a part of whatever group or experience, that there's a social connection, that there's a validation, a respect of who I am, without needing to do what we call in many communities code, without meaning that I have to assimilate, you know, I have to change the way I talk, I have to change the way I walk, I have to, you know, and I'll tell you, I always tell folks, you know, I'm gonna always share with you from the Black perspective, because that's my perspective, that many professionals and people who work in predominantly white environments have felt and feel that they have to do what we call coding. And that is to do the best you can to blend in, to assimilate to the predominantly white culture, whether that is in how you dress, the examples that you use, the way you share stories about your life, how much you let people know who you really are. I met with a group once where a Jewish woman said in the group, she said, "Do you all see me as a white woman? But I see myself as a Jewish woman. And every day I wake up afraid of what might happen because of the anti-Semitic actions in this country, of just going to the synagogue, of my children going to bar mitzvahs and doing the activities that we do within our culture." And she said, "And I've never admitted to this group before that I was Jewish." She was going through that group as if she was what they see, a white woman. But her identity inside was Jewish, but she didn't feel that there was a belonging and a place for her to be authentic about that. So it's not just people of color. It is many, many aspects of diversity where people feel that they have to, you know, shadow that aspect of who they are because they have not felt affirming. And this is, you know, we know what exists. So you have to create this in this commission for those who you are going to be interacting with, this sense of respect and support and safety. Next slide. So next slide, let's talk a little bit about some of the things. Ooh, oh my goodness. We can't do this work without hearing from Brian Stevens. I forget what I think. I'm excited, just what I think. How many of y'all know Brian Stevens? Okay, Just Mercy. Yeah. The Lynching Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. If you ever take a field trip, that's the place to go. The Equal Justice Initiative, which is what started his work, where he moved to Montgomery, Alabama, and began to work with individuals who were on death row, who have been unjustly. And I want to tell you, this was in the 1980s. This wasn't like something in the 50s and the 30s, where Black men were being arrested and falsely imprisoned and put on death row. And that's when his work started. And this was in the 1980s. And I'll tell you, when I read that book, I was like, where was I? Why didn't I know this? What kind of bubble of a world was I living in? Well, you know, I was young. I didn't know. So a lot of people don't know this history that you're going to be trying to correct. So let's hear a little bit from Brian Stevenson.
Hi, my name is Brian Stevenson, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama. I'm also the author of Just Mercy. This is a critical moment in our nation's history. There is a need for reckoning with our history of racial inequality and racial injustice that is dramatically on display in our streets. We are a nation that is not free. We have been corrupted, polluted by our long history of racial injustice. There are things we haven't talked about that we need to talk about. We are a post-genocide society. When Native people came to this continent, we killed them by the millions through famine and war and disease, but we didn't call it genocide. We said those Native people are savages, and we used that rhetoric to create this ideology of white supremacy. It allowed us to enslave Black people for 2.5 centuries. And the great evil of American slavery wasn't the involuntary servitude, it wasn't the bondage, it was this fiction that Black people aren't as good as white people, that Black people are less deserving, less evolved, less capable. And that ideology of white supremacy survived the Civil War. And often argued that slavery doesn't end in 1865, it just evolves. We were promised freedom and the right to vote. But what we received was terror and violence and lynching. For nearly a century, Black people were pulled out of their homes. They were beaten, they were hanged, they were drowned. They were menaced and traumatized. That terrorism went uncorrected. It would be the police sometimes that would step away and allow the mobs to pull Black people out of the jail, and where they would then literally lynch them on the courthouse lawn. In the 1950s and 60s, courageous Black people challenged this legacy of Jim Crow and segregation, put on their Sunday best to protest nonviolently, and they would pray, and they would fight, and they would march, and they'd be on their knees sometimes and still get battered and brutalized by police officers. The laws changed, but that narrative persisted. And even today, there is a presumption of dangerousness and guilt because assigned to Black and brown people. And you can be an actor, you can be a musician, you can be a teacher, you can be a clergy member, you can be an engineer. It doesn't matter how hard you work or how much money you acquire. You will go places if you're Black in this country, if you'll have to navigate these presumptions of dangerousness and guilt. I've gotten old enough to tell you that it's exhausting. Things need to change. We need an era of truth and justice in America. We need to commit ourselves to being honest about our past, to reckoning with it. In South Africa, there was a period of truth and reconciliation. In Rwanda, in Germany, there has been truth and justice. In Germany, there are no Adolf Hitler statues. In this country, the American South is littered with the iconography of the Confederacy. Truth and justice is sequential. You can't have truth and reconciliation. You can't have truth and reparation. You can't have truth and restoration at the same time. These things are sequential. You have to tell the truth before you get to the restoration, before you get to the reconciliation. I'm excited because in this moment, we have an opportunity to do more, to do better. I believe there's something better waiting for us in America. I think there's something that feels more like freedom, feels more like equality, feels more like justice waiting for us. But to get there, we're going to have to commit to reckoning with our history, to telling the truth about our past, to engaging in important dialogue and conversations. I'm excited that you are having some of those conversations. You're a part of this effort. I want to thank you for that and invite you all to come and see us in Montgomery, but more than that, to invite you to continue being part of this process to change America, to lift up truth and justice.
So there's so much in that amazing, quick analysis of the state of injustices against Indigenous people, against African Americans, we know against Asians. And in this last month, hopefully you spent some time learning about the internment camps, learning about the schools where Native Indigenous children were sent to kind of anti-Indian them, to learn about the persecution of Japanese Americans. The list goes on and on. That this country has perpetuated injustices on many, ethnic, diverse groups of people. The most systemic has been with the African American community. That is the most systemic. It was not the original sin. The original sin was with the Indigenous people who were just brutally murdered. But it was the second where Africans were stolen and brought here for economic benefit. And then we can see just, 400 years of persistent disparities, discrimination, and intentional systemic. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, do you believe what Bryan Stevenson said? Do you believe that there is a need for truth and justice? Do you believe there's a need for truth and reconciliation? So in this work, you really have to also keep your eyes open for systemic issues, meaning issues that are a part of our policies, our practices, our governance, the ways in which structures are established in our set that have been in place, or that are even created, but do not have a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so still tend to perpetuate unfairness and inequitable outcomes. The slide I'm showing you now comes from work from the Race Equity Institute. Another link I'm going to give you, that is, they're based in Durham, North Carolina. They do webinars online, so if you sign up for one of their webinars, you'll feel like you've been immersed in like this historical journey of racism in America. But this shows you that on every indicator, African Americans are disproportionately impacted in a negative way when compared to white Americans. So health indicators, infant death, diabetes, death from diabetes, African Americans are 2.5 to 2 times more likely to have an infant die or to die from diabetes, are 1.5 times more likely to be below proficiency in the 4th grade, are 4 times more likely to be suspended while in through their elementary to high school experience, 2.5 times more likely to be searched in a routine traffic stop. Look at this one, 7 times more likely to be incarcerated. 7 times more likely to be incarcerated. Identified as a victim in the child welfare, 2 times more likely in foster care, a little bit, almost 2.5 times more likely denied a loan, almost 6 times more likely and doesn't own a home, 1.5 times. So this is what we call intersectionality. I don't have a slide on intersectionality, but I'll get you that definition. Intersectionality is an experience that a person has is not just a negative outcome or disparity. Go to the next slide. Do I have disparity on here? No, I don't. A disparity, I'll get to that definition. Is not just a singular event. You can go back to the previous slide. Thank you. So it is likely that an individual experiences below proficiency in 4th grade, suspended, so this is some trauma here, victimized in a child welfare case in some way, and then unable to get a loan, own a home. So it's multiple issues. So we call these intersectionalities. So you also don't want to look in a narrow way as the disparities and inequities happen in a singular uniform pattern. They happen in a compounded pattern where one person, one family, a generation has experienced multiple intersectional disparities and inequities. And that creates generational vulnerability that we have to figure out how to uplift and restore. That often is through truth. People want to hear the truth. So what is the truth that you're going to uncover during this work? Bryan Stevenson says, we must first tell the truth. Then from truth, we talk about reconciliation. What needs to happen? What improvements need to occur? And I mean truth from honoring and maintaining the status quo. In Atlanta, we've taken down all types of Confederate statues. We've changed names of streets. Why does that matter? It matters because each and every day, when an individual, African American, walks down the street and continues to see symbols of hate, you're saying to them, you are an other, and you do not belong here. That psychologically impacts the ability to feel as if you are in a safe place, a place that is truly yours. And it also empowers white supremacy. Now, I want you to think about white supremacy as well. I grew up thinking white supremacy was the KKK. It is not. White supremacy is the realtor down the street. White supremacy is the banker. White supremacy is a police officer who may use his job in the harm of others. During January 6th, we saw all kinds of people storming the Capitol to overthrow a government and using terms and languages affirming white supremacy, who were not your far, members of what we might previously have called fringe groups. So white supremacy this is an ideology. So when you think about ideology, it is a belief. It is a belief that defines how you behave towards other people. It is just that simple. So if you believe, and a book that helps you understand this is Caste, written by Isabel Wilkerson. If you have Apple TV on your phone, you can watch, or you can probably watch it online, Oprah's Book Club. She interviewed Isabel Wilkerson over 8 series. So they go deep into the book. And Isabel Wilkerson really did a tremendous amount of work trying to understand the caste system, meaning skin tone caste, as in white is superior, Black is the lowest level caste, and then Hispanic, Asian, people who are of a tanner skin tone are called the middle caste. And this is a true thing. So I want you guys to say to yourself, do you really believe this stuff? Because this is what guides and has guided hate in America. And that has guided injustices and policies and structures and actions. And you will see some of that in your work, so you have to understand some of the ideology that drives the persistence and the sustainability of this. So Isabel Wilkerson in her book Caste, which is extremely well researched, she's an academician, she's a researcher. She really does a tremendous job in helping us to understand this ideology and how it persisted. And she doesn't just look at America, she looks at Nazism in Germany, and she looks at the Indian caste system as well. So you can see the comparison. Has anyone read that book, Read Caste? Okay, I really encourage you to read it. It's a book stop. Yeah, I mean, it's a big book, but it is worth reading. So what I'm raising here is truth. Truth. You have to find the truth. This isn't just about making people happy. This is about figuring out what you have to fix. What are the long-term systemic issues that are creating disparities that are based in race, in gender, in poverty, and all of these other issues But in the South, it is really driven primarily by race. And so we have to be real and we have to be honest about what the drivers are. So next slide. Some of this is about implicit bias. I gotta speed up. Implicit bias is we all have it. This is the way in which we have all been really influenced in a negative way to see various people in a negative light, whether it's people of color, it's immigrants. Next slide. It's pervasive. You know, the biggest example of implicit bias that, you know, that trended a few years ago was the example of Starbucks. And the two black guys went to Starbucks and they went to the bathroom and they sat down and they didn't order coffee first, which is, how many have done that at Starbucks? Like all of us. They were waiting on their business partner to come, then they get their coffee, they had their meeting. But the manager chose to feel like they looked like they were dangerous. They looked, and so she called the police and had them handcuffed and removed for loitering. And I'm like, Starbucks will have to arrest like half the people in Starbucks because we loiter in Starbucks. You know, you just do.
They encouraged that.
Well, they did before did that. So they had their own little reckoning that we have bias. So implicit bias is those ways in which people are treated differentially because of some belief that we have that may even be unconscious in our action. So you're not thinking at the time, I'm walking past someone, oh my gosh, I think they're gonna hurt me. But your implicit bias causes you to walk closer to the wall, to shift where your purse is, to pause and not get in the elevator with certain people, to do certain things that you may not even be aware of, but that you are doing. And so next slide, the Harvard Appreciation Test, and I will give you the link for this test. You can test all kinds of bias. Looked at all their data and found that there's bias is just rampant, and we know it. Bias against Black people, both Black and white people have bias against Black people. Bias about people in the work roles, bias about hiring. So all kinds of bias. I'm also going to give you guys, if you go to YouTube and Google AC Anderson Cooper, AC360, Clark Gall study. So in 1958 or so, Mamie Clark was working on her dissertation, and she did the first study. It's called the Gall study, that showed that African-American children, Black children, preferred choosing a white doll than a Black doll. So when they were asked which doll was pretty, which doll was smart, which doll did they want to be like, they all chose a white doll. And that was the beginning, actually that study was used in our segregation Supreme Court data. That was the first study that really validated the impact of racism and bias on the psychological self-esteem of Black children. So Anderson Cooper did a replication of that study with some psychologists, and I just want you to watch it. It's profoundly sad that much of what we see is the same, but he got children of all diversity, and they took these children through a series of questions and asked them the same kinds of things, and you'll see the outcome. So what it shows us is that bias is developed early. You also might want to look at David Williams from Harvard. I'll see if I can get a link to David Williams' work, Dr. David Williams. He does work specifically on health and racism and the impact of racism on health. And what he found in his studies is that at the age of 5, a white child and a Black child are viewed watching other children get an immunization shot. At the age of 5, they both say, oh, those children must feel pain. That hurts. At the age of 7, the white child begins to say that the white child they're watching getting an immunization shot feels more pain than the black child they're watching getting an immunization shot. When the black child says both children still feel pain, by the age of 10, the white child observer no longer feels that the black child feels any pain getting their immunization shot, but the white child feels a lot of pain. And he calls that the empathy gap. The empathy gap is hardened by the age of 10 as a result of persistent negative influences of bias against people of color. And so this is critical in our understanding of why people don't care. Why people don't care. By the age of 10, children are already hardened not to care. So we, as we look at this work, next slide, have to really understand, oh, they put it there. I love it when I did what I did. I haven't seen my slides since yesterday. So I didn't look at them in advance today. I just finished them yesterday. So we have to look at issues that people are suffering with from this position. He has found that implicit bias, hardening, the lack of empathy, actually results in health challenges that Black people are experiencing. That because of implicit bias, because of what he calls daily slights, every day experiencing people who don't care about you, who treat you differently, who treat you indifferently, who treat you abruptly, unkind, who isolate you, who look at you with accusatory eyes. These are the kind of impacts. So when you're looking at your data, and you're looking at your health data, don't just look at it from the lens of, oh, lack of medication, lack of access to hospital. Look at it from the lens of racism, implicit bias. What are people experiencing in communities and throughout their lives that are leading to these severe health inequities? So again, we're going to have this intersectional lens to this work. Next slide. So sorry. Keep going. Go past that. Isms. Okay, keep going. This is about racism, structural racism. I talked about this already, so I think I can keep going. Disparities. I talked about it. That's the definition. I did put it in there. Here it is. Disparities and inequities. I've already defined those. We can keep going. Social determinants. So these are some of the things that contribute to health, but they contribute to everything. So social determinants are the things that data shows us impact the quality of life and the ability for individuals to thrive. And when they are not addressed by cities and communities and allowed to deteriorate, the people within those communities do not thrive and suffer. And so these are some of the things that I want you to look at. I want you to look at who has access to parks, who has access to trails, who has access to green space, who has access to fresh food and nutrition. Where do we have food deserts in Stanton? Where do we have, and what contributes to inadequate employment? What contributes to a lack of safety nets and primary care and hospitals and a lack of affordability? Do we have some transportation? Do people really get where they need to go? These are the kinds of things, the social determinants that impact the ability for all in Stanton to thrive. Next slide. I think I have a video coming up. So we're going to use these debriefs actually, I think maybe as we work on your agenda for your first meeting. time for you to talk more deeply in your first meeting. Because I want to get to this video, and then I think I'm going to turn it over to Leslie. Next slide. We already did our break. See how far behind we are? It's embarrassing, but not totally my fault. We're down, and it's lunchtime. Okay, it's because you guys are so good, and I overchopped my presentation, because there's so much to tell you. We really needed a full day. Okay, we're gonna hear this video, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Leslie. This video is Dr. Kamara Jones, who I tell you, I fangirl this woman. She is amazing. She is a brilliant physician, but she describes the challenges that our communities are suffering based on the social determinants of health better than I ever could. So we're gonna let you listen to that.
I'm Dr. Kamara Phyllis Jones, past president of the American Public Health Association. You may have heard the saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When it comes to health and well-being, preserving health is always best. But there's more to the story. Imagine that someone is walking along and whoops, they have just fallen off the cliff of good health. And if that were you, you'd be relieved to find an ambulance at the bottom to speed you on to healthcare. But what else can we do to protect you? How about a net to catch people? But nets have holes, so some people may still fall through, and the net is likely to rip over time. What else can we do? Clearly, we need to build a fence at the top of the cliff to keep people from falling in the first place. But if a lot of people are near the edge of the cliff, even a really strong fence will not be enough. To keep everyone safe, we need to move all the people away from the edge of the cliff. We do that by addressing the drivers of poor health that go beyond our genes and beyond our personal behaviors. Things like low wages and under-resourced schools and unsafe housing. The environments in which we live, work, and play shape our health. These are the social determinants of health. These things can either propel people toward the cliff's edge or keep them at a safe distance from it. But this cliff analogy is incomplete. We need to also realize that the cliff is really three-dimensional. And then to notice that resources and people are not evenly distributed along this cliff. At some parts of the cliff, the ambulance at the bottom may have a flat tire. Or maybe there's no ambulance there at all. Maybe there's no net, nor fence. And usually, at those parts of the cliff, the people are being pushed closer to the edge. These are the differences that lead to health disparities in a population. Differences in the speed and quality of the ambulances represent differences in quality of care. Differences in the presence of ambulances, nets, or fences. These represent differences in access to care. And differences in the distance to the edge of the cliff represent differences in the opportunities and exposures and stressors that make some people and communities sicker than others. We need to ask a lot of questions. Why is the cliff three-dimensional? Why do some parts of the cliff lack ambulances or nets or fences? And why are some people being pushed closer to the edge? It's because our economic system fails to provide an even playing field. It's because racism, which is foundational to our nation's history, is still with us and continues to cause profound harm to us all. And because discrimination against people of color, women, immigrants, the LGBTQ community, poor people, and others holds back our nation's health and well-being. Everyone should have the opportunity to achieve good health. If we try to address the social determinants of health without tackling these bigger systems of structured inequity like racism and sexism, we risk moving some people away from the cliff's edge, but not others. We risk making health disparities worse. Experts at the Urban Institute are exploring how local, state, and national policies have gotten us to this point, and what policy solutions inside and outside the healthcare system can drive fundamental improvements in health and well-being for everyone. We can all play a role. We can support our kids' teachers. We can participate in neighborhood cleanups. We can volunteer with community organizations. And let's recognize and dismantle racism, sexism, and the other big systems that assign value and structure opportunity in ways that undermine some groups more than others, but hurt us all. Doing so will radically improve health and well-being for everyone by creating the conditions all of us need to have the best health possible.
So there's so much there, but I hope what you take away from that is that some people are being pushed to the cliff. That there are differing levels of safety nets. Some people have no net at all. Some people at the bottom of their cliff, those things that are there are not working and functioning for them. When others have great access, great quality, and great opportunities. So there is inconsistency in the ways in which the social determinants of health are distributed and available to all in our communities. And that what drives these inconsistencies is often the historical legacy of policies, practices, and operations that are rooted in racism, sexism, bigotry, homophobia, and many other isms. And so when you see these inconsistencies, you have to ask questions. Why is this so? Why is this happening here, but it is not happening over here? What is the difference? Is there a practice, a policy, a system, or an operation that is sustaining these inequities? Was there a change that removed benefits or structures or safety nets from certain communities? How are people being pushed to the edge? And what will it take for us to move them further away from the edge? I love that analogy because people really are at the edge. Many are at the edge. And the social determinants and those things that are failing them keep pushing them further. And sometimes it is something that for many of us can be non-problematic, like your car breaks down. That's enough to get you right over the cliff if you don't have resources. Or you lose one of your jobs. You have two or three, you lose one. Or you lose your daycare. Or you lose your care for your elderly parent. Or like I said, the Senior Citizen Center isn't open. And many seniors got their meals at the Senior Citizen Center. They got breakfast and lunch there. So what's pushing people to the cliff? I want you to be asking these questions in this work. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to turn it over. We talked about equity all throughout, so I think we've got that. I'm going to turn it over to Leslie.
Are we changing the agenda on the fly?
We are, we're changing the agenda.
Okay, so here's
on
what I
the fly.
suggest.
We changed on the fly.
What I said, yeah, so why don't we
Yeah.
take a lunch break?
Okay.
And why don't we combine, the charge objectives, outcomes, roles, responsibilities, when we come back and we'll lump all
Yeah,
that
I think we
together
can do
and
that
then
quickly.
break out into a group and talk about it. So I
Talk
think
about
you have some
different-
different
yeah.
breakouts
for everybody.
Yeah.
So why don't we take a lunch break at 12:30? I do not need 45 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have plenty of time.
Y'all do not want to hear about that. So why don't we, so I think lunch is next door. So, we'll, that means meeting at 12:30.
Right, and then we've got plenty of time to do this.
Yes, I think so. Okay.
All right. Let's get started with that. Okay, get your attention, thank you. So, I think some of us are a little more. Yes. I think one thing you tried to adjust with us,
Yeah, Leslie and I tried.
I don't think we got control.
Well, actually, I think it got a little cooler. Maybe we were not in the room. I know.
Yeah, I don't think.
Well, if we ever meet in here again, we will figure out.
Is it possible to open doors?
Well, that door is open, it's at the out, we closed the outside door, we thought it might be bringing hot air.
Yeah, that's what it was doing earlier.
Nice
Can you
job.
open those doors and the one at the end?
To get some cross information. Okay, so let's go. Let's jump in. Use your hand out. No one will shame you for fanning. So let's, so now we're gonna go, deeply into your roles and responsibilities specifically on the commission. Hopefully, even though I know I'm gonna go very fast, as we talk, you'll reflect on those aspects of the work that we talked about prior to lunch. Next slide. So, you know, what's important for me from our previous conversation, and then Leslie will take us to the real tactics of the commission, and then we're gonna do some breakout groups, is, as we said, is that you all really listen to understand. So as you hear your responsibilities, your scope of work, be thinking about how will we make sure that we include voice, power, inclusivity, and creative belonging in all of the spaces where we gather as your internal group, and then as you gather externally, because everything you do has to happen here as well. We have all been in many groups where some people talk more, some people talk less. I tend to be a more. Who's surprised? So, I like to do things by what we call, you know, step forward, step back. If you tend to be a person who steps forward a lot, to think about that and restrain and hold back a little. If you tend to be a person who holds back a lot, think about that and try to step forward more. You know, some of us process information differently, and we process more internally, thinking first and talking second. Some of us, like me, process externally. Half of what you hear me say will be brainstorming until I get to my point. So those of us who brainstorm out loud, we probably need to edge that a little bit. Because that makes us hog up a lot of space, because we're like just spewing out ideas. And then we get to, oh yeah, this is really my point. So we have to learn how to work together and know our tendencies so that it happens here. We talked about diverse citizens' lived experiences. We talked about the root cause of disparities, identifying systemic issues. We talked about understanding multicultural communities. We talked about challenging assumptions and asking questions, centering diverse voices, and seeking to understand traditional stance and dynamics. I think we covered everything in that first half. This is kind of my checklist. Like, did I miss anything about what you all should be centering? I think I covered all of my points. So now we're going to talk, considering that list of your role, we're going to talk specifically about your scope of work. Okay?
So I'm not going to switch to my slide. You all have a smaller slide that should I?
Never mind. I'm gonna
Switch to her side. Then I'm gonna run her
She's all I
side.
can do. No, you don't have to run.
Yes, I do. I want
I only have 2 slides on.
So, actually, the resolution is in your notebook under tab 2. It's the last page, so if you want to scroll to that, that might be helpful. There's also a presentation right before that has these exact slides in it. So you can refer to that. And then you can fill a lot of trademark on that. I'm just giving this to you. So the resolution is not too prescriptive. It gives you all a lot of freedom to kind of decide what you would like to do. But it does prescribe a few things. You'll be supported. Unfortunately, I play 2 of those roles right now, maybe all 3. So we're gonna have to figure out on the staff side. We have Morgan Smith over here raising her hand is amazing. She's in my office. And actually what I'm thinking is I'm sitting here is I'm gonna get a small internal team of staff together to help divvy up the work. We need a team of our own to help support this group. So that'll be my next step when I get back after my conference next week, which I'm really excited about. So that's the first kind of item to talk about. Secondly is that you shall have at least 1 public hearing. You don't have to have just 1. And by that, I mean, like, typically those are held in chambers. Whoa, there's a hole here. Oh my gosh, I almost fell in it. I'm just stand away from the hole. Those are usually held in chambers. They're advertised so people know about them. So you should have at least 1 of those. But in addition, we put down community conversations that you can actually go out to the community, and we can have those anywhere. You all can decide. And that, in my mind, that's you all being out in the community and having several of those during your time. Any questions about anything on this slide before we go to the next one? Pretty, yes, ma'am.
Just clarification, all of our meetings are going to be public,
Yes.
isn't that correct?
Yeah, and I'll talk about that at the very end. Yes, ma'am. Okay. So in the next 18 months, the goal of this commission, and this is where it's pretty open, is to develop whatever you want to call it. We're calling it here an equity and diversity strategic plan. I've seen them called equity plans. There's lots of examples. I was telling somebody, it's interesting because if you think about who has in Virginia has other commissions set up like this, I think there's only 1. City of Roanoke. That has been. We are 1 of 2 in the entire state that are set up just like this. Fortunately, I know the person who runs that. She was a student of mine in the class. So you all could have her come. You could meet some of their commission members. We could take a field trip to Roanoke. I mean, so we have some opportunities to learn from the city of Roanoke and what they've done since they have a commission built just like this. And I believe they're also working on an equity plan, but there's lots of examples of these out there. So as you start to figure out, especially what your preliminary report will look like in December, we'll want to figure out what you want this to look like within that time. And then the last 12 months, we can wrap that up.
Right, and I gave you have a couple of examples in your packet, I think, if you turn them out.
Yes.
Yeah, there's Fairfax, but it wasn't like it didn't come from a commission. It came from an internal city. And then there's King County, which is in Seattle, again, did not come from a commission, came from an internal work group. However, what they did, I think, just gives you ideas for the kind of outcome that might come from the work, but not as community and citizen driven, which is very special.
Definitely. So these 2 dates I've already talked about. So your initial report will be presented to City Council in December. So that's not a lot of time, that's 6 months. And then
you can see that the reporter is an update.
Do we call it an update? We call it an update.
I think
it's an update. What's that? That sounds better, actually.
It would be a progress update on what you all have accomplished so far and what you have planned, because by then you should have plans for 2023.
Your last
So,
comment.
yeah.
But then the final plan, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
is to be presented that next year,
Right.
summer 2023. So those are the parts of the resolution that are pretty prescriptive. The rest of it in terms of, now there's some language in the resolution, yeah, we don't look at this yet. The language in the resolution, there's some language about data, setting your goals. So that, again, that's all up to you all and to your group and what you all would like to do and how you want to approach that. And I think that's what you're going to break them out. So we'll let Push it down like that.
Oh, it looks like it was already down. Hey, this is trick. Trick is trickery. Trickery, no fun.
Do you want to go back to your PowerPoint?
You need to? I don't think so, no. That's our roles and responsibilities, stuff, we'll do that. Okay, so you can pull your resolution out. So you can pull your resolution out and go to number 3. Number 3 and number 6. So number 3 is recognition and initial charge with objectively evaluating existing data, studies, reports, developing sources concerning social and racial equity in the city that evaluate social determinants. You saw social determinants. You have what those are in your binder, and inequitable outcomes within the city. The initial charge also includes data collection and research, which could be surveys, which is actually, I think, how we started. We did a survey, and so they have that survey, so you have that survey data, which gives you some input about what the initial survey, folks who filled that out did indicate what they thought was important to look at in the city. But you all may want to collect data in other ways as well, and do research in other ways. So that's one body. The data, the research, the evaluation of existing data, seeing if there needs to be other data, making sense of that. Then number 6 is that you're going to compile a report consisting of an analysis of data, studies, and reports on racial and social equity, as well as research data, that you're also going to have this public hearing, and that you're also going to, as well as other communications we received from Stanton residents. So this, we were thinking of these community convenings or listening sessions. So where might those be? How many would you need? How would you all envision having those? And then recommendations to the council about specific and equitable social and racial and other diversity. So, you know, it doesn't go through all of the diversities, but everything is to be looked at. LGBTQ, immigrant, elderly, disabled, all diversities are included. It just, this was written before me. So, all that. But it is inclusive, believe me. Don't just narrow it down to social and racial. And a proposed framework, strategic plan over the next 12 to 18 months. We agreed that it would be 18, that it would be December of 2023 when this is due. So I'm going to break it down into, I'm going to have you count one, how many do I have here? 14? 3 groups. So 1, 2, 3. If you're like me, you might want to write that number down because later you'll forget, like, what was my number? So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Okay? And you're going to be talking together and brainstorming about number 3 and about number 6. Number 3 and number 6. Knowing what you know about how the social determinants of health are, about possible inequities, we talked about data, we talked about data, we talked about what is that, MIT data. We talked about, all kinds of, possible data sources. You each know data sources because of your roles and where you work. What questions do you have? Where do you think you'll start? What would you want to pose to Leslie and her team in terms of the kinds of information, data, materials? Who do you think you want to speak to? I know all this stuff. And who are the experts? Who do you want to talk to? So just start brainstorming. What do we need to do to kick off our story? Who needs to be at the table for thinking about the analysis? How do we analyze this stuff? Who's good at that? Share your skill set. Share your interests. Then for number 6, you're going to talk about really the hearing and the listening sessions and how you're going to get more voices in the room. How do you envision doing that? These likely would take place next year, because this year you're going to be gathering data, you're going to be talking to some experts probably, you're going to be meeting more, getting to know each other, and getting organized, and then creating a plan. So how will you execute? How many listening sessions do you think you're going to need? How will you get people out? Where around town might you go? So just begin to brainstorm and think about how you will bring number 6 to life. And then you've got your data, you've got your listening session. Is there something else you need to do that we didn't even think of, right? So what would that be? What other things do you want to add to the list for consideration that isn't even here, but you have the freedom to do? So what would those activities and functions be? And then we've got our analysis section. When would you be doing the analysis? Who would be involved in that? 14 people don't analyze data. That's not gonna, everyone here who knows that, it's like, that doesn't work. So who's gonna be a part of that? If you and your team, is that your thing? Are you good at analyzing data? Then we've got to come together, understand the data, make the recommendations. Again, how do we understand the data and how do we get more voices included once we have understood the data, to hear from them about recommendations also? Remember, we don't want to make recommendations for people, to people, but with people. And then you got to write your report, right? So how are you going to get that report written? Who's going to be a part of that? Who's going to write a report? Who's going to write a strategic plan? Who understands that process? So you would then identify that from your group. So this is a preliminary, like, straw man discussion, right? Because in the next few months, you guys are going to have a real strategy, a real plan for how you're going to do this work. That you put dates to, that you decide how often you're meeting, that you decide where you want to hold all these sessions. So this is the beginning of the straw man of your action plan of how you're going to implement this work. Yes.
I know this is really premature, but let's say we do all this really hard work and get a really good report and present it to city council with ideas. Can they vote no?
So, I would think, and, the city council is going to, first of all, hear all the ideas. There's no guarantee that every idea that you suggest is going to be adopted, or what time frame is going to be adopted. Most ideas are going to have a budget attached to them. Most ideas are going to have a time frame attached to them. So I think, that all depends. And as we go through it, you're going to be communicating. You're going to liaison. There's going to be extra meetings. There's going to be hearing. Everything that you're talking about and what you're suggesting, and really able to be your advocate, as well as to work with Leslie and her team to give you all the feedback about what's within bounds and what's not. If you came back and you wanted to make some changes intentionally that are really, let's say, there are changes that have to do with corporate and job generation, those might be ideas that are good, but they may be ideas that are more partnership ideas. And so your recommendations would really have to include partnerships. And so you have to think also, should you have a listening session with partners? Should you have a listening session with companies and your chamber and your small business, so that when you have ideas that might involve them, they aren't caught off guard, right? They knew this process was happening and they were a part of the process. So, you know, I think it all depends on what comes out of this and what it costs and how long it takes and who the partners are and how they will be brought along. But I think that they're open, they want to hear what you can come up with. I mean, am I saying the right thing?
Yes.
Yeah, they really want you to not be editing yourself. So let's work our plan, work the process, and believe that when you all develop a plan that makes sense and it goes forward, that it'll be supported.
So do we already have a set or even an estimated budget or time frame that we need to take into consideration as we're making our plans?
So your time frame is between now and the end of December 2023. That's when the final report is due.
I mean, the time frame for our individual ideas. Say we wanted to build another road in between one of the parks. Do we have a time, do we have to make that set time frame? Okay, it's gonna start in September and it's gonna end in October.
So you're not gonna be making time frames for any of that. This is to develop a plan. The first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna identify those inequities. You're gonna hear from people about what they feel are those things that are related to social determinants of health and to their ability to thrive in this community. You're gonna look at data, and then you're gonna create goals or strategies that would help to change, uplift, create equity, move those forward. You won't be setting any goals about timeframes for what to do. That will come next. You're just gonna say, this is what we think should be done. The city council would then have to accept all or some of your recommendations, and then they will take those recommendations and assign them to the authorities that would be responsible for doing that. And that wouldn't be us. So you would not ever say, we're gonna build a road here and at this time. You could say that we need improved roads and we need improved transportation, and this is why. And these are the areas of our city where roads and transportations are most problematic. And these are the kinds of barriers that they present to those people. And therefore, this is one of our recommendations. And then the experts are gonna have to take that and create a process. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
I just might ask, I may have missed it or forgotten it, but what was the appropriation in the fiscal 23 budget for this work?
This commission has $20,000 that I was able to have in the budget for, it starts starting July 1st.
And you'll more than likely use a lot of that on your listening sessions for space, the space costs, for, you know, if you want certain, and I don't know, don't want to be speaking out of time, but if you want certain community members to participate, sometimes you have to offer like vouchers for transportation or vouchers for daycare, or, you know, otherwise people can't come. You know, you're just gonna have to think creatively. And I don't know what all that 20,000 can be used for, but it will be used to support your work in ways that are necessary in order to get fully inclusive participation. Yeah, so you're gonna each get a flip chart. I think that you're gonna, the ones can stay in this room. The twos can go, there's two, that one is pretty big out there, the 2s and 3s, or this little hallway section over here. One of you might want to go to a 2 or a 3, decide where you want to go. Because of the acoustic, we want to be able to talk about. I'm going to have, 20 minutes. I know there's not much time for practice. Remember the strong man. So don't get bogged down. It's more brainstorming than anything, right? So don't get bogged down trying to answer all your questions. Get it on paper, brainstorm it.
Leslie, there's only 3 groups.
There's 3 groups.
Oh, there's 3.
1, 2, 3. You're gonna have 20 minutes.
Mark.
You said one staying here?
One is staying here. And you can gather with the others.
And do you want me to try to have, do you want me to?
Okay. One is over here, 2 and 3 went out somewhere. So we'll find the 2 and 3.
And then you're 2, you have 6 already off on it.
Out there.
Number 1 stays here.
Yeah, number 1 stays right there.
I'm little, I don't think we.
I got you, little Rena. You don't have to budge.
Leslie?
You stay right where you are.
Yeah, I need the exercise.
Well, that's okay.
This is a good position for everyone.
So this is our plan. We're gonna do 10 minutes for report out, 10 minutes for roles and responsibilities and other logistics, regulations we want you guys to know, and then 10 minutes for Q&A. And then that's our last 30 minutes. The report out are just listening and hearing. So you're not gonna have an opportunity to ask each other questions because you've got your own report out. So if there's something that someone says that you think, oh my gosh, that's a great idea, write it on your little notepad. Because at the end, we're gonna post a blank notepad. And this is what I call, I can't leave without saying this notepad. You all know what I'm making stuff up, right? Right? I can't leave without saying this notepad. But I do this all the time, because I'm not name for it. On your way out the door, post it. I don't want this to fall off our radar. Because things, little ideas you're gonna get triggered as you hear them. So get your piece of paper and then you're gonna transfer it to that notepad and we're gonna have that stuff. So let's go with group number 3.
Number 3.
Yeah.
Sorry, misunderstood. We spent a lot of time on 3 because we're group number 3.
That's fine. Wherever you spend your time is not time well worth spent.
But these are data sources we're aware of. And most of that is demographic type data. But Census, Alice Report, Augusta Health has a community assessment, or at least they did. The Planning Commission, I think, has a lot of stuff about neighborhoods. My classes on social services, United Way has been having regular assessments. But this is kind of large scale data. The challenge, there's a fair amount of it, but the challenge is getting down to talking to people. And we were pretty good at finding out where you might talk to people. But
Can you just read a couple of those?
yeah, so first of all, we were thinking that this large scale, this demographic data could very well tell us people who are not represented, and they'd be the first ones we'd want to talk to. So who's left out would be the first question. And then there was a suggestion of at least beginning perhaps with older persons who have a longer memory and kind of having a historical dimension to talk about how we got to where we are, which led us here to an event by Building Bridges for the Greater Good in this past month about urban renewal. But we have a lot of historical information, and some of it that is, I think, relatively accessible to perhaps offer some perspective.
Now, what's that D question for demographics?
I think we just got started on that. We never really got.
Oh,
No, that
okay,
would be
okay,
that.
okay.
You start with the broad demographics and
Of what?
and where, but then what kind of questions would you ask, and how would you ensure that you had the people come in that you wanted to come in? Those are all kind of questions. And then we just got started there. Now, once again, we're good at where.
Okay.
Different parts of town. And these places should be accessible and safe.
Okay. Okay, all right, thank you. No, that's fine. You did a great job. Thank you. Group 3. There is building the straw man, and that's what we're creating first, and then we're gonna piece it all together, and you guys have subsequent meetings coming up where you're gonna really put detail to this plan. But this gets the beginning of the plan shaped. Okay, let's go with group number 2. And I am timing you, by the way, you get 3 minutes. You went under, you get you would have 10 whole years. Oh, not singular. Oh, so you do it like you are.
I've heard that before.
I know, this one all the time, I can tell. I'm the same one. 3 minutes.
All right, this feels pretty familiar to what you all did, so I think we can make it quick. Basically, just went through and looked at organizations and sources for data that we could think of in the area. Valley Aging Services, nonprofit, Boys and Girls Club, the library schools, the hospital, the health needs assessment, Florida Dairy Food Bank, faith communities, Housing Authority, Building Bridges, Census. What does the city have that we might be able to use? The Community Foundation, or some of those. And we actually went on down here, Habitat, ESCD, Wilson Workforce, the Valley Mission, and Simbaras. All right. And of course, we're Baldwin University to as a resource with some information. Things that we would need to consider are languages, how we can make what we're doing most accessible to everyone in the community. Sign language, of course, physical accessibility too, including transportation. You said that safety, didn't think of that. That's a good idea. Childcare was also something to consider. Irregular work hours, and then what kind of size, or just, we didn't get very deep on that, but what size do we want to have? Do we want to have like one large or lots of small? And what kind of size would we need for? Let's see, location, we were leaning into something that's more neighborhood based, so having smaller pockets around in different neighborhoods in the area. Let's see, how would we distribute the information? This was a big topic for us in our group. And really what we came to was being able to use these community partners, which people are already plugged into, and which they have, community members have a trust and relationship with these partners already. So how can we utilize those relationships with these community partners to help distribute information? So if we kind of talked about, everybody's going to check their email or even have access to email, or how do we go around and we fly in neighborhoods? How can we make sure that there is access to the information for these meetings? And then some sort of, some sort of community liaison. Should we have some sort of process where community members can come and be a little bit more involved, maybe in just a single meeting in the process, and what might that look like?
Very good. You did well. This whole picture here is a listening session. All these folks, this is like listening session number 1, almost, because they have to understand the work of this commission in order to be your trusted partners, and in order to be advocates for this work, and to share their data, and to feed information to you. So really, this is not even a listening session, it's a partnership session with all of these community nonprofits. Oh, hello.
When did you go?
Probably the bell. Okay, all right. I'm just so excited about that.
So a lot of what we did was a lot of plus ones to what the other groups did, but we talked a lot about data. We wanted to find out what the housing demos were in the city, like percentages, who owns their home versus who rents, which housing areas are LGBTQIA friendly. We wanted to find out about health access, like what is currently out there and what's the participation in the programs that do currently exist. And this includes physical, dental, vision, hearing, and also mental health. We wanted to find actual demographic information from the city, not just what the census says, that breaks down ethnicity, gender identity. We also wanted to find out judicial criminal justice stats. That's a big thing. I know there's a lot of people in here. We want to find out incarceration stats, like what the use of force statistics are. We also mentioned, so this is for the city employees in this room, city employment. We want to find out what your perceptions are, what services that you have as city employees, just to find out more, because city employees are just as much a part of the community as everyone else, but they're always in the background doing all the administrative work for us, so we want to include them. We want to find out food equity, what programs exist for food in this area, what the utilization is of that, and then with our nonprofit organizations in the city, we want to find out what kind of contractual agreements exist between the nonprofit sector and the city, what more can be done, where there are holes, where there are successes. And then education is another huge one. Find out what those resources are, find out what teacher support exists, training, are there pockets of education limitations throughout the city, why are those there? And then going into question number 6, hearing the listening sessions, we want to find out the who. So rather than us just trying to think of who or which communities you want to go to and how we will have those conversations, we want to involve community leaders and ask them, how would you like us to have those conversations? Where would you like us to go? Who specifically do you think we should speak to? It's not us dictating to them, it's them telling us so that we can get more involved. We also said that when we have these conversations, accessibility is a huge consideration. I know Group 2 mentioned this, having ASL interpreters there, making sure it's accessible for those who need mobility, making sure that we have bilingual sessions for our Hispanic community, for other communities around that need that. And we also want to make sure that we are working to identify the best locations of that with all of that information there. We did talk a little bit about what our strengths are between all of us, Sabrina, Xavier, I'm so sorry, Nathan, and Lou. It was, so let's see, Nate was good at writing, conversation was for Lou, data and observation was for Xavier, and public speaking for Jake and Sabrina. And I'm a little over time, sorry.
No, you're right on it. I can't believe everything you said. So I love that each group brought out some different aspects of the straw man, which is amazing. That's exactly what we needed. You all did a phenomenal job. Let's jump into how you're going to do this. Like, what's the logistics of how this commission is going to work? And remember, if you some thought was triggered by anything that was said, write those down so that you can put it on a I can't leave here without saying this forward. Morgan, can you post that for us? Our customized, I can't leave here without saying this forward.
So this is your website, and if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, please do make some improvements to it. If we need more improvements, we'll look for suggestions. We will make sure all materials are posted. We'll get the recording of today's meeting posted for everybody. So we're going to keep that. Anybody that has great visionary websites, Morgan is our person, and I know she would love to get feedback. If anybody has any thoughts about how to improve your website, this is your resource for this commission. So please visit it if you haven't already. So just quickly, so when we have our next meeting, we'll think about sharing we're asking this kind of staff our meetings, so we will happily do that. It might be me, it might be Morgan, we'll figure that out, so. Also, we suggest you come up with some bylaws. I actually have the City of Roanoke's bylaws, they're in your book.
They're in the pocket?
Yep, so take a look at those. They look pretty turnkey, they look pretty good to us, so take a look at those in our next meeting. We can talk about those and have some bylaws for you all. Yes, ma'am.
If you look at your larger slide there, there's a description for the chair and the vice chair. We want you to think about yourself and whether or not you feel that you or one of your colleagues here who you've gotten to know. So the chair serves as the primary commission meeting facilitator. All right, so the chair of the board, the chair of the commission convenes the meeting. That person helps work collaboratively with the city and city council leaders. So that chair is the spokesperson for the commission, not anyone else. So you don't talk to the press, you don't reach out and call people, it goes through the chair, because no one, you know, it's like 14 people calling Leslie and her team. So you would communicate to the chair communicates. That person is the primary leader, co-develops the agenda, and works in collaboration with the city leaders on making sure the agenda, the minutes, and everything is ready for each meeting. Helps to draft the logistics and the meeting plan. So really is there to preview and help talk through the way the work is going to flow, working with them. Other commission, process, provide ongoing communication and leadership, represent the commission publicly when needed, and adheres to principles over personalities, meaning really sticks to, you know, in ethos of leadership and equality and not, you know, I really get along well with Vicki. She and I have some in common. I think she would be great for this, but what's the right way to create a process that everybody is included on the commission and that all voices are heard on the commission. And then the vice chair partners with the chair, is going to serve in the chair's role should the chair be unable to attend the meeting because of illness or travel or just a conflict of a meeting date. Leads on tasks that the chair requests. So the chair may say, I'd like you to take the lead on helping the commission, helping the city identify these listening session dates based upon the criteria that the commission has laid out. And the chair might do that. Adheres to, again, the principles of leadership over personality. So those are the two positions that are needed to help lead this commission. And Leslie is gonna come out to the group and see if you're self-nominating or if you have seen that quality in someone today, you can certainly make suggestions. And we may think of one or two people who on the commission who we think would be great. And so we're gonna be powwowing, express that word, that's the wrong word. We're gonna be getting together. See, it flips. And when you see it flip, then you stop yourself. Powwow is not cool, in fact. We're gonna be getting together and identifying a couple of ideas as well. And we may reach out to you and say, had you thought about being in this role? So those are our leadership positions. Any questions on chair, vice chair?
I did a question.
And time, chair and vice chair will take a lot of people ask about time. It'll take more time than the regular commission, that's for sure. So you're gonna have to be willing to put in some extra time. I can't really say, to be honest.
I can't either,
because we haven't started yet. So what we do, what you gonna say?
When we have these meetings, I know in public records, we have to take minutes and have all of that. Will there be city staff there to take notes for that, or is that?
Yes, there will. That's why there's no.
We're gonna cover you. It may not be me, but somebody will be here to cover you. We're gonna have to, we'll work that out, so. There's something else I was gonna say, I forgot.
Was it about time? How much time?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, in terms of the chair and probably vice chair, we will be leaning, I mean, staff will lean fairly heavily on you in terms of kind of coordinating things. So I think at first it'll take a lot more time, but I think maybe it'll level off. But I think it'll be a heavy lift in the beginning just to coordinate everything. And so we will be relying heavily on that person's leadership to help us get through that. So I think
The folks in Roanoke have some perspective on it.
yeah, and I was gonna say, as I said, I know the person who coordinates that commission, and so, I'm gonna be talking to her often and frequently, and, you know, about what they are doing, how they're handling it, and they have a whole office, unfortunately, like, that's her only job, and we just don't have that. So we're gonna have to do a team approach, frankly, on the staff end, and that's fine. It's not gonna be a problem. We'll make sure you all are staffed and it's consistent. So you don't have a lot of different people you're working with, and make sure it's the same people. And speaking of support, Robin mentioned the council liaisons earlier, and this is literally the description from their own procedure. But I'll just add to what Robin said. You all can decide how engaged you want the liaisons to be. And they can sit and listen. Obviously, that's their primary role, but you can engage them too. I mean, you're not prohibited from engaging the liaisons or asking for their engagement. So, but it's up to this group. You all can decide how you would like to use the liaisons as your support and what kind of support you want them to give you. And really, their primary role is to be a report out to the rest of the city council. So just think of it that way. But this is literally from their own procedures, this description. Conflict of interest, this is really scary, but it's not, I do not believe it's gonna affect this group. I don't think anybody's gonna get taken to a $500 dinner or get a huge gift. But it does apply. I can't think of a single instance where this might happen, but just for awareness. So if you have any question at all, or you ever feel funny about something, you can reach out to me or our city attorney, whose contact is at the end of this. But again, he and I talked, and you couldn't think of any instance where you would get a huge gift or get taken to dinner, or like, you do this for me, you know, that's how this works. So so this is the scary code, but I don't want it to scare you, so. So in terms of logistics, we've talked about these meetings are public, so every meeting is noticed, which means the public knows it's happening. They know when, where, what time, what the purpose is, dates, locations, and I'm still kind of thinking through where this whole group can meet comfortably. So we will continue to work on that, the length of your meetings, and again, to have a consistent day of the week or a day of the month, or you all need to tell us how often do you want to meet, and we don't figure this out right now. What I could do is send out a doodle poll and get your input in the next week. And we can talk about that more at our next meeting once we have some of that input in the doodle poll. These large meetings will be live streamed, so wherever we go, we would live stream them. And then of course, materials and speakers. And then if you visit the Boards and Commissions webpage, you'll see examples of what other groups look like. You don't have to look like that, but you'll see, for instance, what historic resources look like. And so that might be a good one to look at. That's not like the Planning Commission, but it's kind of more like how you all are set up. So you might want to go just look at that webpage and see how they're set up. Is anybody in here, are you all thinking you may ever want to try to Zoom in remotely, have remote participation, or have it as an option? Okay. Then at our next meeting, we'll have a policy. That's not a problem. And I just wanted to get some input on that. So at your next meeting, we'll adopt a Zoom policy, and that will be fine.
Leslie, does a quorum apply to this group?
So I think it would apply to this group, correct? Yeah, so if you do have a remote participation policy, a quorum would have to be here physically at the meeting, and then the rest could be Zoom participants.
So that means you would have to notify the chair, the vice chair, and the city administrator liaison that you want to be on Zoom. And then when that maximum number that can be on Zoom is reached, other people may be denied the opportunity to be on Zoom because they would need you here for the forum. Right? So
So we'll walk through that process the next time we meet, and we'll have a policy for you all to review and adopt. Do you have a question? And then subcommittees, so there's a rule of three, so if three or more of you want to meet about commission business, it is a public meeting. Two of you can talk, and three of you run into the grocery store together, don't get scared, you can talk. You don't panic if you run into each other in a restaurant or in a grocery store, but we can't have subcommittees of two, and so subcommittees will be public meeting. You can do it, we can totally do it. So we will have to work all that out. But they would be public meetings too, which is just part of the process.
And there will likely be subcommittee, or you're not gonna get all this work.
Yeah.
You can't be effective working in this large group, and so there will be subcommittee.
Fire alarm.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there will be, get done at least. And also, yeah, I can't remember what I was gonna say, so.
Keep going. That's fine. Boy, I think that's great, but that is a fire. It is? It's a fire alarm.
Do we want to pack up?
Well, let's go. We're basically done. We're gonna do some trials.
Okay. I will send you all an email with next steps.
And we're gonna do Q and A, so.
Coordinate the schedule. Okay, so we'll work on that on the uniform. Sorry, guys. Oh my gosh. Do we need? You want to say your name? That'd be great. Okay.
Our passport is in
Thank you.
On in here, they told me.
Morgan, right. We are not fire alarms. That's the way to end the meeting. That's the way to end the meeting. Right?